For the location, has to come get it.
Chair Lee, we're ready when you are.
Thank you. I will now call the March 4th, 26 Planning Commission meeting to order. May we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Bedard,
Present.
Commissioner Malikoff,
Present.
Commissioner McPhail,
Present.
Vice Chair Mead,
Here.
Chair Lee.
Present. Please stand as you are able and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Agenda finalization. Are there any changes to our agenda?
We have none.
Okay, thank you. We move to item 1 on our agenda, public comments. Would the clerk please read the statement of participation?
This is the opportunity for members of the public to comment on items not appearing on the regular agenda. Because of restrictions contained in California law, the Commission may not discuss or act on any item not on the agenda, but may briefly respond to statements made or ask a question for clarification. The Chair may also request a brief response from staff to questions raised during public comment or may request a matter be agendized for a future meeting. Public comments will be limited to 3 minutes. And Chair Lee, I did not receive any requests to speak for items not on the agenda. And I see no others.
Thank you. Moving on to item 2, approval of minutes of January 21st, 2026. Sorry, what?
You were gonna let me introduce you.
Sorry. Sorry. Before I do that, Commissioner Malikoff just wanted to make a quick introduction.
Yes, I'd like to just introduce Luis Rubalcaba, who's listening on Zoom, and he's a professional planner, lives in Cathedral City, wants to learn more about what's going on at the Planning Commission level, and I just wanted to give him a very special welcome.
Okay, thank you. Now moving back to the approval of minutes, January 21st, 2026. Do you have any corrections or additions to those minutes?
Chair Lee, we do have some proposed amendments, and I'll go ahead and cite those right now so you know what you're considering. And also, this is also to approve the minutes of February 4th. But for the minutes of January 21st, 2026, we received comments from a commissioner. So on page 4 of the minutes, there was a portion that was completely removed. The portion that was removed was Commissioner Malikoff raised broader concerns regarding the fire risk and requested earlier fire department review of relevant provisions, including encroachments and shade sale applications. So that was removed completely. It was in the wrong area of the minutes and was noted elsewhere. And then on page 5, the portion that reads, Associate Planner Schultz responded that tag does not include the fire chief or fire marshal, and that fire code review is generally addressed through established processes, primarily by staff during code development and later through fire department review. That was revised to read, Associate Planner Schultz explained that tag does not include the fire chief or fire marshal, and that fire code review is typically handled by staff during code development and then later by the fire department.
Thank you.
All the proposed changes we have.
Okay, thank you. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on the minutes?
I did not receive any requests, and I see none.
Thank you. Do we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes as amended?
I'll motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Vice Chair Mead and a second by Commissioner Malikoff. Please vote.
I had a comment I wanted to make before we vote.
Did we already?
We're taking the vote now, so go ahead with the vote.
And Commissioner Malikoff, I do believe you can still make that comment after the action.
Right.
Based on our conversations. Okay, and the motion carries, all ayes.
Commissioner Malikoff.
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment on condition 3.16. The way that it was phrased was exactly the way that I meant it, in that it would be implemented with as much flexibility as possible, and that it didn't have to return to Planning Commission. It didn't have to return to Planning Commission if staff could find a way to make condition 3.16 happen with the trees. So I was very happy with the way that was phrased.
Thank you. I'll move to item 3 on our agenda, public hearing items. Item A, similar use determination 26-0001, a request that a similar use determination be made that used vehicle buying and distribution use is similar to the other permitted uses in the PCC Planned Community Commercial Zoning District. May we have the staff report, please?
All right. Good evening, Chair Lee, Vice Chair Mead, and Commissioners. My name is Manuel Rocha, Assistant Planner here at the City of Cathedral City. Today, I bring before you similar use determination number 26-0001, which is a request that a similar use determination be made that a used vehicle buying and distribution use is similar to other permitted uses in the PCC. So last November, AutoNation was notified that its business license application cannot be approved for the proposed location on East Palm Canyon Drive. Staff determined that the proposed operation constituted a used vehicle sales use. Under Municipal Code Section 9.96.170, used vehicle sales are conditionally permitted only while within designated areas along Ramon Road and certain addresses on East Palm Canyon Drive, prohibiting such use in other PCC areas of the city. AutoNation contended that the proposed purchase-only used vehicle office is a retail use. However, the purchasing and selling of vehicles are not classified retail within the city's zoning code. Chapter 9.06 of the Municipal Code allows for the Planning Commission to determine whether an unlisted use may be permitted based on its similarity to listed uses. Therefore, through the similar use determination process, AutoNation is requesting that the used vehicle buying and distribution use be allowed as a permitted or conditional use within the PCC district. Just for clarification, this is solely for a similar use determination. Additional review for the proposed business AutoNation may be required via a CUP if that is determined.
Thank you.
So used vehicle buying and distribution uses such as AutoNation are an emerging trend in the car industry. Such a business operates with a business model that includes the following. The customer arrives at the property with or without an online offer from the business for their vehicle. The employee will inspect the exterior and interior of the vehicle. An offer is made, and if accepted, the purchase transaction occurs. The customer is given a check for the purchase price of the vehicle. The purchased vehicle is transported from the property to another facility in AutoNation's network within 24 hours. So as stated in the Cathedral City Municipal Code, Chapter 9.30, the purpose and the intent of the PCC district is to provide for retail service and commercial uses which are of relatively high intensity and are necessary to provide a wide range of shopping facilities and goods, professional and administrative offices, and entertainment. The PCC district is the most widely available commercial district in the city and is found along all the major corridors. So here you will see a map of all the PCC zones located within the city. As mentioned, under the special provisions section, used vehicle sales are only conditionally permitted on Ramon Road, as you will see my arrow here. So the permitted uses allowed in the PCC zone are retail and service commercial related, including retail stores, offices, and new auto and truck sales. The conditional uses allowed include used vehicle sales subject to the special provisions section, vehicle rental establishments, automobile repair shops, automobile service stations, and car washes. As previously mentioned, used vehicle sales fall under the special provisions section in the municipal code, which regulates used vehicle sales and vehicle rental businesses to ensure visibility, marketing needs, and compatibility with surrounding development along major streets. The section establishes development and operational standards for the use, including a minimum lot size of 17,500 square feet, separation of vehicle display and storage from parking and maneuvering areas, a required on-site office, prohibition of temporary buildings, and limits on outdoor vehicle display to approved areas, to name a few. The section also establishes locational requirements for used vehicle sales to be limited within permissible zoning districts on Ramon Road. The section did allow existing East Palm Canyon Drive dealerships as of January 1st, 1996, to continue until they cease operation. Those two existing used vehicle dealerships included Webb Motors and Affordable Cars, which both have ceased operations. So staff analyzed the permitted and conditional uses within the PCC, including vehicle rental establishments, retail, and office, and determined that a used vehicle buying and distribution use most closely aligns and is similar to a conditionally permitted used vehicle sales use. A used vehicle sales use, as it is operationally and functionally the same business model. It's worth noting that at two of AutoNation's other locations, the city of Elk Grove classified the use as a bank and financial service, while the city of Riverside classified it as a used vehicle sales without on-site display. Therefore, staff requests that the Planning Commission consider the information contained in the report, the use determination request letter, and all other attachments, and make a determination of similar use. In making its determination, the Planning Commission shall base its decision on the following criteria, which you will see on this slide. And this will be brought up again later, or for the commission to look at. In making such determination, it should be noted that this provision is not intended to be substituted for a zoning ordinance amendment procedure as a means of adding new uses to the list of permitted conditional uses. Further, such determinations, such as this one, are not site-specific. The use determination would be applicable to the entire PCC zone district. Such determinations by the Planning Commission may include determine that the use is deemed to be conditionally permitted as used vehicle sales within the PCC and subject to the special provision sections in the municipal code. Determine that the use is a used vehicle purchasing office and is a new use not contemplated in the zone district and is not similar to any uses listed in the PCC. And other uses as determined by the Planning Commission. I conclude my presentation, and I am available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the commission. Start with Commissioner McPhail.
Okay.
Yes, so really what we're being asked to do tonight is not really anything to do with this specific business. It's to do with whether that type of business should be added to the list of what's allowed in PCC with a CUP or whatever.
That is
So
correct.
it's not really about this specific business that we're addressing tonight in a way. Is that a correct determination?
That is correct. It's
Yeah.
for the use specifically.
Okay, so in the list of items in the PCC zone already, as a permitted use, we have new auto and truck sales. And then with conditional uses, we have automobile repair, automobile service, and then there was the exception that you mentioned in 9.96170, which referred to two businesses which have 30 years ago, which don't exist anymore. And there was another condition against, I guess, in the 9.96170 about the size of the lot they would have to have, the 17,500. So, okay. So the only activity that would occur if we're talking about the specific business on that site would be the 24-hour storage of used vehicles, people coming to potentially sell their vehicles, but there would be no sales of vehicles to the public at that location because within 24 hours, those cars are being put somewhere else. So I guess one little question I have, and this is maybe just me badly reading the conditional uses that are already in here. One of the conditional uses is any use involving outdoor activity or storage is possible with a conditional use. So is this storage? And would it therefore be allowed with the conditional use option already? I don't know, that might be a question for us to chew on. If it's just storage that's happening here, maybe we don't need to go down the step of doing used vehicle sales in this particular type of business. I don't know. I'm just personally wary of adding more exceptions and conditions to PCC zoning, partly because we have this interesting juxtaposition and clash on the agenda tonight where we're talking about a specific issue, and then later on, we're talking about the zoning code update. In particular, we're talking about vehicle uses, specific uses. And we have talked a lot in the development of our zoning code update about major transportation corridors like Date Palm and Ramon and I guess East Palm Canyon as well. And specifically, we've had quite a few discussions about Date Palm, and we've had workshops, and we've invited the public to talk about what vision do we have for Date Palm corridor in terms of residential and commercial. And just a couple of weeks ago, we had an applicant for, I think it was an auto repair business on Date Palm, which we permitted. And I think the sentiment of some of us at that time was, we're not really comfortable with allowing more and more auto-type uses when we have perhaps a vision for Date Palm. Maybe we'll have visions for the other corridors later. So I'm just wary of globally saying we'll add another automotive use to the PCC list. I would prefer us making this restrictive in some ways to certain parts of certain corridors, but I'll stop there and see what others think.
Right. No, I'll just remind all of us that we're looking for questions to the staff right now, and we will get to a discussion.
I did ask one question, and then I started blabbing.
I forgive you. But anyway, so moving on, Vice Chair.
I don't, sorry, I don't know if these are questions you can answer, but I know we're not specifically discussing this particular business. However, do you have a sense of how these businesses operate generally? Because I have questions about that.
In terms of,
So
just
like,
elaborate.
how many employees do they typically have? Is this like a 2 or 3 employees for the whole place? How many cars are typically getting purchased on an average per day? How are these cars picked up and removed from the lot? Or is there a lot boy who's driving the cars to another location, or is a big truck coming up and loading up the cars? Does that truck need certain access? Does it need to be able to get to the building? I think it's a little hard to know, I guess, what the impact would be on the surrounding area, and if the existing zoning can accommodate that without a little more information about how the business runs. And I also had a question about, you mentioned that they have other locations, Riverside. I looked up that one on Google Maps. Seems like a pretty large location. It's a freestanding building, and it specifically says on their website that it does offer maintenance, repairs, oil changes, brake checks, all that kind of stuff. It does say that on the website if you go to the AutoNation website. So this in this application, or not application, but this particular location, it sounds like they were saying there wasn't going to be repairs, but looking at the Riverside one, it does seem like those services are offered. So then that made me question how many additional employees might be there for services and maintenance. So I don't know if these are questions maybe the company can answer, even though they're not, they would be speaking more for themselves. I'm just trying to get a sense of how this business works generally, since you said it's a new trendy kind of thing.
yes, and I can answer some of those questions. So
Great.
The analysis that AutoNation provided, they did mention that this would create 10 job opportunities.
Okay.
So they would have roughly around 10 employees. In terms of the transportation of the vehicles, that is something I'd have to defer to the applicant to elaborate on, because, unfortunately, they did not provide that information.
Okay.
My understanding is that the Riverside office, and perhaps it's just a typo on the website, but I did give them a call, and also on the analysis provided by AutoNation, it does mention that they are also a purchase-only facility.
Okay.
I believe they do auto repair there. Regardless, at this facility, this would be for purchase only. They would not be for auto repair.
Okay.
Okay. Done?
That's it.
Okay. Commissioner Bedard.
My questions have been asked.
Okay.
Good job.
Malakoff.
Yes, okay, so we're doing a similar use determination, and if we were to take a positive action on it with conditions that would eventually make it to the development code, because you keep a list of the similar uses that are approved, and then eventually they become part of the code. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question? I apologize.
A similar determination, you keep a list of the similar determinations that you make over time, and then eventually those similar determinations make it into the development code.
Correct.
If I
So-
may just chime in there, what we're doing for a similar use determination in this context is actually setting precedent. And so I know that we are undergoing a development code update, and so part of the considerations moving forward would be that, if a business similar to what AutoNation is presenting arises, that maybe they have slight variations for this particular AutoNation's proposal, you might be okay with making a certain determination that it falls within one category, but maybe another similar use would come before you, and you might have a different determination based off of certain factors, employment, maybe they will store it for more than 24 hours, things of that nature. So I don't want to jump to say that this is going to be automatically included in our municipal code, but you are setting a precedent, and what you use to make this determination as far as the factors of the business will be in basically the policy determinations moving forward when items like this are presented in the future.
In general, similar use determinations are made over time. The department keeps a list of the similar determinations. So it doesn't make sense to make a similar determination if you don't do anything with it. It sets precedent, but eventually, it needs to make it into the development code.
So the precedent is basically the city's policy, right? And any kind of use that would even be similar to something that is being presented like this AutoNation, we would present it to you, right? And say, hey, you approved AutoNation as I'm just using an example, as a used vehicle sales lot. So if something else came along, staff would use that determination to provide information to that new business. I just want to make sure that we're very clear on the record that this isn't going to automatically make all businesses that are like AutoNation, approved in this site, in this district.
I do understand that, but what I'm trying to say is that similar uses, not just this one, but any similar use that's made, eventually, rather than just have a list of determinations that are made, eventually they need to make it to the development code and either be approved or not.
That would be a choice for city council and for staff to present that ordinance amendment.
I agree
So,
with that, but
yes.
eventually it would be considered, because that only makes sense that if you have a list of similar uses, that you do something with it.
Right, staff will obviously use it as a policy, reference it, and make sure to include that information of previous meetings and previous discussions in whatever future business items are presented to.
Okay, but we're just making a
I
similar
just
use.
wanted to make sure that.
Yeah, I
it wasn't
understand
an
that.
automatic, right, that there is going to be some sort of follow-up following this use determination.
Well, tonight, we're just making a similar use determination, and then it's up to staff to bring it forward or not. Okay. So you just said that it was an error in the report that in Riverside, it was all sorts of maintenance activities, and they don't do that there. And in your report, you said there's no maintenance that would go on whatsoever.
Yes, no, my understanding is that there is no maintenance in the Riverside location. I believe it's an error, it might be an error on the website, or maybe there was just some type of misinformation.
But in this proposal, regardless of what it says on the website, in this proposal, there's no maintenance. It's simply that somebody drives up, goes into the office, and then AutoNation will either purchase the car or not. And then it stays there for 24 hours, and then it's removed.
Correct.
And that they do approximately 125 a month.
Correct.
Okay, now, what, if, see, I'm not sure that this is like a used car sales because it's, you know, it's more like PMR, which buys jewelry, which is much smaller, but it's the same concept that you go in, you bring your jewelry, they give you a price for it, and they either buy it or they don't. And here it's with a vehicle, the big difference is that a car is a lot bigger than a tennis bracelet. So what, if we were to move forward with this, but not as a used vehicle sales, but as just used merchandise for purchase, like PMR does, or like PMR does, would that take a separate action, or would that be something we could do tonight?
My understanding is that that would be an action that can be made tonight. Correct, Stephanie?
Right.
I couldn't hear you.
My understanding is it would be a determination that can be discussed among the Planning Commission and made tonight.
Okay, and
Just, if, Vice Chair Malakoff, if I can just clarify something. So so the commission can make in this discussion, you know, we presented some potential options for the determination. If the commission were to discuss come to a conclusion that the use that's proposed is similar to another use that's permitted in the zone district, they would need to identify what that use similarity is so that it's very clear for us in the record.
Okay.
can you repeat that?
Well, you had asked if the commission were to make a determination that it was like DMR. I just wanted to clarify that the commission clarify what the actual use would be as opposed to a
Okay.
business name.
And the other questions I have are for the applicant.
Okay. And we don't have an applicant tonight?
Yeah, we
Yes,
do.
the applicant is here.
Oh, the applicant is here.
They're in the front row.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, so following on from Commissioner Malakoff, that if I was to say that this is not a used car business at all, it's a car purchase company, would that be accurate in this location?
It would be accurate, however, a car purchasing use is not currently listed in our zoning
I
code.
understand, yeah. But if we were to determine that there is such a possible use, then we could make that determination and say that this business could only be limited to purchasing vehicles and not for any kind of resale of those vehicles. Is that correct?
Chair, just want to kind of clarify
Yes.
here. So staff is really looking as far as this determination to identify, you know, I'm just going to use Vice Chair Malakoff's example, you know, maybe it's considered more commercial, so maybe the closest thing would be a retail store, according to what you see, you know, listed. But there's no conditions of any kind, right? It's really taking the business and what they are proposing and just identifying a similar use that staff can apply the standards of that similar use to this specific business when they provide a subsequent application, if necessary.
But we're being asked here to generalize this as
Yes, yeah, but I
similar
just
use.
wanted to make sure that, you know, I think maybe I misunderstood you and I apologize if I did, but, you know, asking that they limit it only to purchases.
No, I'm saying, could we make a determination that a business which is based on purchasing vehicles only is a permitted use?
So I believe what would happen, since we don't have a use identified as purchasing vehicle office only or purchasing use only, that would constitute a new use. And so what would happen then is the similar use determination is not the appropriate vehicle for new uses. New uses would have to go through a zoning code amendment.
Okay. But if we make this determination as a used car business, we can't then exclude the sale of vehicles.
So if the planning commission were to go through an analysis and say, yes, we agree that it most closely aligns to used car dealerships are already permitted in the PCC zone. However, they're limited to the Ramon Road corridor. And so would not be permissible at this particular location.
Okay, so
Sorry, just a quick clarifying question. So if we were to say it was a similar use, what you're saying is we could not add any conditions that would have to be, we have to, if we say it's used vehicle sales, it would, the same conditions that would be applied under a CUP for used vehicle sales would also be applied to this business. We couldn't carve out separate conditions for that conditional use?
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
yeah,
So I don't think the speakers are working correctly because I'm having trouble hearing. So we might want to have our IT look into that. So if we make a determination that it's a similar use, for them to come back with an actual application, we can't say what kind of application that would be, because I would think that it would be, if we were to move forward, it would be a conditional use, not a permitted use. And we can't put what aspects of the conditional use should be considered.
So we just keep using examples to hopefully kind of paint the picture here. But say that you decided to use the used vehicle sales. I'm just using it as an example. Because under this code, it would require a conditional use, or there are other standards, for example, in our specific plan that may not allow that use in maybe this specific location, staff will take your determination and apply the standards to this business. So your determination will help guide this specific applicant to their next step. Is it, I am submitting an application and it's not allowed in this specific location. I am submitting an application and according to this, it's a retail store, so it's a permitted use. I can move forward administratively with staff. So your determination guides the next step for the applicant on this business.
Okay, so so then the intended consequence of my PMR comparison would not be helpful, because then it would be a permitted use and we wouldn't get to see it again.
Correct.
If we were to, since we can't say that it's a conditional use, it would be only a conditional use if we made the similar use determination that it's used vehicle sales, which I don't believe it is. Then since used vehicle sales are only allowed with a conditional use permit, but if we were to make the determination that it was used vehicle sales, then we have the conundrum that they can't locate on East Palm Canyon.
Right, but all that to say is I think that what, staff is trying to get you to focus on too is really just the business aspects so that determines where we land, right? But you're absolutely correct. So, and then to add a third option, as Ms. Molina was mentioning, if we say it's a completely new use, suddenly we're looking at like a zoning amendment, right? So your determination dictates our next step as staff.
okay. Thank you. Any other questions for staff?
We can't determine if something's a new conditional use.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you for the staff report. I'll now open the public hearing for this item. If the applicant is here and wishes to speak, they can.
I do believe the applicant is present, and if you'd like to speak, please make your way to the lectern, please.
I'm Diane Blaisdell, Counsel for AutoNation. This evening is Chuck Kawa with AutoNation prepared to discuss Mead's questions, Vice Chair Mead's questions regarding exactly how this business is going to operate. Essentially, it's a transaction. Offices, 2,500 square feet and less, 2 to 3 employees at the most, 2 cars a day probably, as if they're hoping their business model stakes out. And essentially, they have a website. You can go on their website, you can enter your car information, and it spits out an offer. You take that offer down to the office, you drive the truck, car, whatever it is. Someone looks inside to see the condition, outside to see the condition, nothing under the hood, no repairs, no maintenance. And I walk out with a check if I approve, and I don't walk out of a check if I don't want to sell it to you. This is up and coming in the car industry and automobile industry because it offers the consumer a better experience. They don't have to deal with high sales pressure. We all know the square fours, right? You walk in and they bounce numbers around on a piece of paper for the afternoon. None of that. And if you don't have an offer and you see it and driving by, you go by, they come out, they say the same thing, inside, outside, go inside, offer comes up, accept or reject. Walk out with a check or walk out with your car. The cars will remain on property only 24 hours, which might be 2 a day. There's plenty of parking, especially in the back, which while the landlord has offered it, it's very large, and my client only sees the use for 2 to 3, maybe 4 parking spaces because of the employees. It'll be transported to either the Riverside location or to one of their AutoNation also has auctions, or it will be transported to another one of their used cars sales locations. The problem that we're having here tonight is that we don't qualify on either. We're not used car sales and we're not new car sales, and so it's like we're somewhere in between. I support the fact that it is merely a transaction, like PMR. You go in, take the offer or not, walk out with your stuff or walk out with a check. The only difference is my client might have 1 to 2 vehicles parked on site for 24 hours. You had one additional question regarding the transportation and all of that access, which I will let the representative talk to you about. Great question. I believe it's just going to be on like a tow truck because it's just 1, maybe 2 vehicles, and I'll let him answer that question. If you have any other legal questions, I support the fact that you recommend or make a determination as to the use and request that the staff make a determination that it is, if you want, conditional use permit, and that way Commissioner Malakoff, your questions and everybody's questions and or conditions can be applied by staff. No sales, transactions only, max car number, whatever conditions that you and or planning wishes to put upon it. So I will let.
Good evening. My name is Chuck Koya. I've worked for AutoNation for about 16 years and moved out to this place for this business venture here. The transportation question, it's very close to the Lexus store, and it's very close, I think, to the Subaru store. So what we do is we have a transportation truck, usually a truck with 2 or 3 car trailer that would come the very next day to pick up the cars that we purchased. Just like a transportation truck would drop off cars to the Lexus store or drop off cars at the Subaru store, it would be in that same type of a lane that they park in.
Would you say that your model is most similar to companies like CarMax who will buy any car?
It's similar to CarMax, except that when we have a We Buy Your Car store, we don't retail them. It's just we buy it only, and then we send it to one of our other AutoNation stores.
Right. Okay. Other questions for the applicant? Yes.
I have a question for you and then one for Attorney Blaisdell. So the staff report said that there's no room to park in the back. And are you going to put your vehicles, if you do 120 a month, let's say you have 4 a day, the staff, according to city staff, there's nothing available in the back. So can you use the back to put the 4 vehicles or not?
From what I've seen of the property, there is a fenced-off area. It looks like it had 12 parking spots.
Is
Well,
this,
you have the Hertz leg, and then you have the consignment leg, and then you have another consignment leg. It would be on the left side of that center. And if you look on the aerial that we provided in connection with the application, you'll see from an aerial standpoint, there's parking spaces going into all of the buildings. And then there's this section in the back that the landlord will provide my client, and they are still in negotiations regarding that because they don't think they're gonna need it. And so you'll see about 10 to 18, I don't think it's fenced in the aerial, but you'll see it sort of in the back there, not really in the back, but on the side of the building facing East Palm Canyon. So that's where the parking could be if necessary. And that answers that question.
well, I'd like to have staff come back up after we're done. Ms. Blaisdell, you're a well-respected land use attorney in the area.
Thank you.
I've dealt with you before. You're always knowledgeable on everything. My question for you is legally, what you would call this business. So AutoNation is an auto dealer that has a subsidiary that does what's this new use called auto purchase. Is that fair to say?
What's it called? We Buy Your Car?
We buy your car.
Yes, it's a separate entity.
Okay, so the larger business under the umbrella is an auto dealership.
That is interesting.
However, this is not. They're just purchasing vehicles, similar to what PMR does, and it's a land use that doesn't have a name in our code.
Correct.
So this would establish that as
Correct.
a
It's
land
just
use.
what auto dealerships do, but they also buy used cars, but they sell them and they sell new. No selling.
Okay.
Any
Any
other
other-
questions?
Questions for the applicant?
I have one when staff comes back.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for your
And
time.
if we could have staff back at the microphone, there's a couple of extra questions. Is that okay?
I just want you to know we do have public comments when you're ready, Chair.
Yeah, okay.
Hello again. Questions?
I just had a quick question, comment that you can confirm or elaborate on. I'd actually sent you a couple of emails regarding this issue, and I think you had replied to say that we're talking about the specific entity here, but it's a building of 2375 square feet, but they would have access to a 7,000 square feet shared parking area, which I'm assuming is the area that we were just talking about. So there would be the potential, subject to some agreement with the landlord or the owner, that there's a shared parking area, and they may work out an agreement where, yes, you can have 4 spots or 5 spots or X thousand square feet. So there is parking possible in this particular development. Not that that's what we're talking about tonight, really. But that's correct.
Yeah, Commissioner Rickville, you are correct on that.
Can I go? You and I talked on the phone, and there would be parking available in the back, but you had said that wasn't available. So is it available?
So behind the building is landscaping. To the side of the building, there is additional parking. that
And
belongs
that's
to
what
the
they were
center.
referring to, so it's
Correct.
just semantics as to where this disagreement was. And do you know we can open the public hearing again after he's done. So the parking is it would be to the side, and if we, since this is a new use, well, wait a minute. Okay, so when they came in and first approached you, do you know, did they look on Ramon Road to see if there was anything available there where they wouldn't have to go through this process?
No, my understanding is when they first came in, they applied for a business license, and the business license was denied. They had already, I believe, signed the lease for the property on East Palm Canyon Drive.
Okay, so then that's something we can ask them if they ever looked on Ramon Road to see if there was a suitable use where they wouldn't have to go through this at all.
Don't think that matters at this point, but
Oh, okay. Lastly, back to staff. So we could make the determination that it's similar to a used vehicle, or we could recommend that since it's a new use that's not defined in the code, that they do a zoning text amendment. But if we do the determination that it's a used car dealership, then so if we make the determination that it's a used car dealership, then they could actually go and not do what they're saying, because they would be able to apply for a conditional use permit to do used cars, which isn't what they're really asking for. Does that make sense?
Well, the similar use determination would basically be saying that their business use operates like a used vehicle sales.
And then they could do used vehicle sales.
They can, but it wouldn't be allowed on East Palm Canyon. Currently, it's only permitted on Ramon Road.
Okay, so it would be a similar use determination for a use that wouldn't be allowed on East Palm Canyon.
If that was the determination that it was a used car dealership, or, sorry, if I can, City Clerk, could we have those uses, the permitted uses, the PowerPoint back up? I think that would be helpful for the commission and for staff. So yes, if to your point, if the determination was a used vehicle sales, that is what we're applying, and so suddenly that use would not be allowed on Palm. Yes.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that again? You said if we make that determination that it is in fact a similar use to as used vehicle sales, then you're saying used sales would not be allowed?
So Chair Lee, if I can clarify, the PCC zone district conditionally allows used vehicle sales. A separate section in our code says used car sales are allowed in the PCC, but only on Ramon Road. When this use came into the city, it was assessed by staff, and we determined that it most closely aligned with used vehicle sales, and that's why the business license was not approved.
Right.
The applicant does not agree with that determination and decided to submit a similar use determination. Our staff report presents to the Planning Commission that with what is permitted and conditionally permitted in the PCC zone district, which this property is in, it most closely aligns with used auto sales. And so we're saying that's our thinking of how it aligns. And if that's the case and the commission agrees, then the use, you're right, is permitted, but not at that location, only on Ramon Road. The commission also has discussed whether this is some new use that we really don't have a use classification for. Commission can decide, determine that, but what that means is then we'd have to amend our zoning code to determine where it should be permitted and if there's any conditions associated with that. The commission could also go through this analysis and say that they feel it aligns closely with some other use that's already permitted or conditionally permitted in the PCC zone district. That's also permissible under this provision of the code.
And if I could just add one more thing, I do want to encourage the commission to really consider the business and the operations that are being presented before you for the similar use determination, not the outcome, right? You know, just because all of a sudden we're going to maybe run into issues down the line, that's something staff can work with the applicant on. But the encouraging and what I would like everybody to keep in mind is we are analyzing the actual business operation to determine a particular use, not trying to fit it into a particular use for a goal that you're trying to reach on the other end. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so just circling back, because it's my understanding, based on the conversation we had earlier, that if we were to say that this was a similar use to used vehicle sales, the same conditions as used vehicle sales would apply, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Current used vehicle sales conditions say a minimum lot size of 17,500 square feet shall be required for used vehicle sales or vehicle rental enterprises, except where such use is to be conducted entirely indoors. This business is not going to be conducted entirely indoors. Someone will have to come out, they will have to look at the car, which is going to be outdoors. The vehicles will be stored outdoors. So just from if we cannot apply specific conditions to this similar use, it doesn't meet the conditions of used vehicle sales as they are currently written. So I guess I just want to make sure that I'm understanding that you guys still feel that it's a similar use, even though it clearly does not meet those conditions.
So the analysis right now is how this use is classified. Once that determination is made, then we would look at the applicable provisions under a conditional use permit. So, for instance, if the commission says, yeah, we feel it most closely aligns with used vehicle car sales, then that's the determination we have. We go back, we look at our zoning code, says, yes, it's a conditional use permit, but only on Ramon Road. It would not be allowed at this location.
Right, but I'm saying it wouldn't be a minimum of 17,500 square feet either. But you told us we couldn't add it couldn't have its own conditions because it's considered the same use. So I'm saying I don't see how it can be a similar use just based on that one condition.
That's a development standard, not necessarily, technically not necessarily a use consideration for the purpose of this exercise today.
So if I may, maybe this will help clarify. That is the purpose, is making sure that we focus on the business aspect, right? Not the follow through of what is going to be applied to that specific business following that. So if it is a used car, or used vehicle sales, we would apply those standards that you're referencing, and it may meet it and it may not meet it. And then there has to be like a different analysis done internally with staff to determine what the best course of action would be for the specific applicant.
I guess it's just difficult because we're not talking about this specific applicant. We're talking about the use in general.
Correct. So that's
it's
why
difficult at least for
Sorry,
me, I
yes.
can't speak for anyone else. It's difficult for me to make a determination when we're basically being told that once we make a determination, if we were to agree to this with one of the proposals, that you guys are then going to go off and come up with a new set of standards that we would have no input on. So I mean, I think I personally would have ideas about what those standards would be, and that would be part and parcel with the way I would vote. I wouldn't want to vote for something without knowing what those standards were going to be moving forward for this similar use, I guess. That's where I'm struggling.
So I completely agree with everything that's been said by my fellow commissioners. And I would really be fearful that if we were to make a determination such as this, that it would open the door to used vehicle sales. And the specific reason that the code is written the way it is to protect the auto zone, which is one of our largest agglomeration of businesses. And it was written that way in the code and in the specific plan for the auto district. So if we were to make a determination, there would be no way to prevent used vehicle sales. So since this is a new use that isn't anywhere written down or established yet, not that it's a good use or a bad use, it seems like this may not be the right application for it.
So is there a question?
Well, the question,
I want to
the
move on to the rest of the public hearing, and then we'll come back to discussion of the actual issue.
well, legally, the cleaner application would be a zone text amendment.
So if I could just refer to Chair Lee's position, let's open up the public comment portion so that you can hear the public's opinion on it as well, and then you can come back and make a decision on that.
So, are there any public comments?
Yes, Chair, we do have one request to speak. Mr. Andy Jessup, please approach the lectern.
Andy Jessup, Cathedral City Auto Center. I'm the president of the association, the largest auto center in the cathedral in Coachella Valley, representing the foundation of this city, Cathedral City. I represent 13 brick and mortar buildings and 17 franchises that are the foundation of this city. We represent this community through employing thousands and investing millions. AutoNation's presentation tonight as a publicly traded entity from an out-of-state location with no focus, input, or desire to be part of the community is, we're moving words around. It's a used car dealership that they are. Publicly traded, Wall Street driven used car dealer. It's on the internet tonight. They've thumbed their noses at you by being denied a license, putting banners hanging over there in front of all the new car dealerships that have invested in your community, and they're gonna pretend they're not doing used car sales? I'd be wary. It's a slippery, slippery, dangerous slope. 30 years ago, 1986, it's 40 years ago, the forefathers of this city put together the conditions and the provisions of our auto center. And in the CC&Rs, used cars are aligned with new car franchises. If AutoNation had a new car franchise and wanted to sell their used cars, welcome them. If it's a used car focused operation, I don't care what they want to call it, sales or purchase or acquisition, Ramon Road is the ideal location. I here represent a whole lot of dealers that invested a whole lot of millions in your city. We're proud to be associated with this city and representing this community. We ask you to vote no on their request.
Sure. Thank you.
Chair Lee?
Yes.
We did receive a written comment. The following comment was received for the record, provided to the members of the commission and made available at the entrance for public inspection. Erie Knox expressed support for AutoNation's request. I will also note we received one comment after the deadline. It will not be made part of the record, but it was provided to the commissioners to review.
Thank you. Okay. So I would entertain a motion.
Chair Lee, if we
Yes.
could close
Thank
the
you.
public
I'll
hearing?
close the public hearing, exactly.
Do we have discussion first or the motion first?
We will, as usual, we'll take a motion in order to start our discussion.
I make a motion that we deny the request for a similar use determination.
Okay? Any second?
I will second.
Okay. And so we'll open it for discussion by commission.
This is a really tough call because to me, I sold my used car, many used cars, and bought new cars, and this is one half of what already exists. So having a new determination just doesn't make a lot of sense to me because in my mind, what's already there is buying used cars. So it doesn't feel new. And at the same time, the location isn't desirable. So I would vote more in favor of it because it seems like it's something that already exists in my mind. And I don't think it's a new use determination. So do I think they should be on Ramon Road? Yes. Do I think if we're just voting on the actual business itself, not the company, just the business itself, then I would say yes. So convince me no.
Vice Chair.
I think if we were to go back during the presentation, there was, I think, Mr. Roca, you had a list of kind of the criteria we were supposed to evaluate for PCC, whether it fit the, it wasn't the determinations that you were giving us, but it was the screen before this, I believe, the slide before this. Oh, no, it was that one. It was that one, I'm sorry, yeah. So I think when I saw this and it said for number 2, when it says the use in question meets the purpose and intent of the district in which it is proposed, that's where my concerns all lie, right? So PCC is supposed to be high density or high intensity retail.
Correct.
Businesses that have a lot of employees, a lot of foot traffic, I think that provide a good amount of services to the community. To me, especially because we're looking at this being citywide in all PCC areas, it does not meet that purpose and intent. It's a few employees. It's very few people coming in on a regular basis. It's a good-sized building. Now, the Riverside one may be larger than something that would go up here. But I think if we're going to say all PCC zones could have we'll buy your car lots, that removes a huge amount of land inventory that could be, to me, higher intensity, better serving public retail and office space. And so that's my concern. Is I don't think this business, whether it's used vehicle sales or something else, actually meets the purpose and intent of the PCC district. And that's really my biggest concern there. And I don't think it is used car sales. And I wouldn't say it's even traditional retail because, like I said, it's very small, low intensity. So maybe there's a better place for it, but I think this is a new use and it should have its own conditions and standards attached to it.
Commissioner McPhail.
I guess I kind of agree with the vice chair there, and I guess I go back to something I said too early in our conversation, where there were other conditional uses. You know, is this a pig? Is this an elephant? And we're not quite sure what it is. But there is already listed as a conditional use in PCC any use involving outdoor activity or storage. Is that what we're talking about here? I don't know if we make that determination or not. Is it already covered as a conditional use? I guess that's my general comment.
My concern is similar to Commissioner Malakoff's, and we're being asked to make a general statement on something very specific. We have a specific application by an applicant, but we're being asked to make a general decision. And that's not a good fit for me. We need to address the underlying policy first and then come back and look at the application. So I don't think we can say, oh, we'll shoehorn this application in as a used car business, which then opens the gates to anybody else applying for the same thing. And I don't like the phrase slippery slope very much, but it is that kind of thing that it takes us away from the original purpose of setting this up in order to encourage, and I have no problem with the business itself. AutoNation sounds like would be a great partner for the city, and it is indeed used by CarMax. Carvana is a similar sort of process. So yeah, it's certainly something that is very common now, I think, in the car industry, but it doesn't fit the facts of this case, and I don't see how we can reasonably determine that it is a used car business, or which then opens up the possibility of any other business also wanting to do the same thing. So I would be voting no at this point.
Or yes to the motion.
Voting yes to the motion.
Yeah, no on the determination. Yes to the motion. I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay, so I agree with what everybody said, and Commissioner McPhail said something very good at the beginning which I can't quite quote, that it was murky to open up more similar use determinations. And I agree with that also. But I think the one thing that hasn't been said is that it really isn't the right application to be made. The application that should be made is a zone text amendment for a new use that hasn't been defined, hasn't been explained in our code. And I would be very uncomfortable opening up a similar use determination to all of PCC. And I'll also say that, you know, the East Palm Canyon, adjacent to the auto center, is something that we need to be very protective of. It is the bread and butter of our city since 1986, I believe. And everything that you read prohibits used car sales that's not affiliated with new car sales. Everything you read in the code, everything you read in the auto center specific plan prohibits all of that. So I think we need to stick with what we know, that's not a good place for this kind of thing. And if they want to go ahead and do a zone text amendment, then they should.
Thank you. Could we restate that motion?
So we have a motion by Commissioner Malakoff and a second by Vice Chair Mead to deny the request.
And we can move to a vote.
May I chime in really quick? Thank you, Chair. When you say deny, Manny, could you go to the recommendations? So I don't know that we have necessarily, I know that commission and the public is very used to like approval and denial of a certain application. And I think we're looking for more than that. It's really a determination. So if I may suggest, it sounds like there is a motion on the table to deny. I just want to clarify what the denial is.
I think what the spirit of our motion was number 2.
Yes.
That it is a new use not contemplated in the zone district and not similar to uses listed within the PCC zoning district.
Maybe we
Is that
could
accurate?
make a friendly amendment to,
I think we can just say that we're basically, that's our motion, that we determine that it.
Okay, let me do this. So if you would withdraw your motion.
I withdraw my motion,
Okay.
and the second needs to be withdrawn.
I withdraw my second.
Okay. Now, do I have a new motion?
I'll make a motion that a used vehicle and buying and distribution operation in the zone is not similar to the uses listed in the PCC zoning district. Is that what we want?
Yeah, as determined there, yeah. Okay.
Do you have a second?
Yes, I will second again.
Okay.
Thank you.
We have a motion by Commissioner Malakoff and a second by Vice Chair Mead. Please vote.
It says McPhail made the motion.
1 second. Okay. Let me go ahead and switch the screen for the public.
So just to make sure that we're all voting the right way, it's, if we vote affirmative, it's to disagree with staff's recommendation.
They didn't have a recommendation.
They didn't have a
We have a
recommendation.
determination.
It's option number 2 on the screen, on the slide on your screen, or was.
Yes, that it's a new use.
Okay. Please vote. Motion carries 4-1.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item number 4 on our agenda, non-public hearing items. Item A, Development Code Update Discussion of Division 4 Specific Use Standards. May we have the staff report?
Good evening. Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, Planning Commission. Cynthia Schultz here to give you a brief introduction to this before I turn it over to Minty Harnish, who will facilitate tonight's discussion. And before that, I wanted to provide just a brief overview. So this is the second to the last one of these Planning Commission work sessions on this initial draft. So this is, the next section that you will see will be the objective design standards, and that will come before you on April 22nd. I wanted to call that out specifically because April 22nd is not a normal Planning Commission evening. It's a City Council evening, which also pushed us to have that meeting earlier. So we're having that starting at 3 o'clock that afternoon. And
Sorry,
we're-
what was the date?
April 22nd. It's a Wednesday.
Okay, it's still.
Yep. It's off schedule.
Okay.
Yes, and it's at
What
3
time
o'clock.
did you say, 3 PM?
Yes, and we'll be doing this in study session. City Council usually has this area. So they'll be preparing for their study session and regular meeting. So again, I want to mention that just to make sure that you all knew that when that meeting comes out, it's not a mistake, it was intentional. Let's see, tonight's format will follow the same format as the previous meetings that we've held. The steering committee did discuss this particular section on February 23rd. Their comments and feedback are included in your packet. We've been providing that, I think, every meeting. We also anticipate additional discussion on other sections, as has been the tradition of the Planning Commission to bring us your thoughts and comments as usual. Also, I wanted to note that the cannabis section that is in the draft represents a placeholder for the amended cannabis ordinance that was recently passed. So the city anticipates some modifications or amendments to that cannabis ordinance, and I'll look at Ms. Molina over here and see if there's any corrections to what I'm saying here. But we're anticipating some changes to that ordinance based on the early review of and the functionality of how that ordinance is operating. Those amendments largely will be taking place in sections not in the zoning code. So they'll either be in the business licensing, Title V, or in enforcement, which I believe is Title 13. There may be some tweaks that are happening within the zoning code, but that conversation is largely taking place in a parallel discussion, if you will. So, of course, you can bring your concerns about cannabis to the room here, but most of that cannabis ordinance is codified elsewhere in the municipal code and not in the zoning and development code.
So we don't need to address 120 tonight.
I think that's correct, yes. I don't know the number, but I believe that's it. Yeah. Let's see what else. And lastly, the city expects a public review draft of the entire code in May. We also have scheduled a 2-day Planning Commission open house style workshop. It's planned for June 17th and June 18th. 2 days in a row. Minty Harnish will be here, staff will be here, we'll be here having fun, and we'll have food and beverages to make sure that you are nourished, snacks maybe, but to make sure that your brains can function, because it's going to be a big code. It's probably going to be a long section. It is scheduled as an open house, so there's no particular start time. Come when you can, leave when you need to, leave comments, mark up copies, however we need to get through that. We want to make sure that we're giving you plenty of time to engage, to talk to consultants, to talk to staff, to get your questions answered.
Is that a weekend?
No, it's Tuesday and Wednesday, or Wednesday, Thursday?
Wednesday, Thursday.
Wednesday,
Oh,
Thursday.
Thursday.
And it's like it starts at 3, are the doors open?
That one will start at 1 o'clock and go until 7 PM both days.
Okay.
And let's see, that is it. With all of that kind of background information, are there any questions for staff before we dive in?
No.
Excellent.
I'm just saving this in my calendar. So if we go back to April, that on the 22nd, that's the fourth Wednesday?
Correct.
Okay,
Commissioner Bedard, would you please speak into the microphone, sir? Thank you.
Sorry. So we have the 22nd, and then are we on for the 1st and 15th as well? For planning, for April?
Yes, those are regular planning commission. So those agendas will come to you separately.
Those are, but they are to be expected?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So with that, if there's no questions for staff, I'll go ahead and hand this over to Brent and Hannah from Minty Harnish to facilitate tonight's conversation, tonight's discussion. Thank you.
I think you have to click on enable editing to,
Okay, now you should be good.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, good evening, Commission. Nice to see all of you again. I feel like we're seeing a lot of each other lately. So it's great to be back. I did want to, I know that there were some looks when Planner Schultz was mentioning that the work session in June, that open house. That's really meant to be where we got all the feedback on the public review draft, and it's the final time that Planning Commission can sit down and go through it in its entirety before we run through the CEQA process and then the hearings. So it's a really roll your sleeves up moment for the Planning Commission, and it's the open house style, so you can drop in as you please. We'll have lots of topics to go over. If you want to have one-on-ones with us or city staff, that's the intent of that 2-day. So I just wanted to clarify that. So this evening, we are going over standards for specific uses. So this is Division 4. Think of Division 4 as actually going to be divided into 2 parts. The part tonight is 99% of it. The second part will be in April, and that's the April 22nd meeting, and that is the objective standards portion. That applies to multifamily, mixed use, and commercial development within the city. So tonight, this is something that we've all gone through other meetings into last year. We'll give a brief overview of what Division 4 is, what's included, and then there's a series of questions that both myself and Hannah Woolsey, a planner, who's the lead planner on this project, who's here with me tonight, we'll walk through those questions and then ask that of all of you to provide feedback. As Ms. Schultz had mentioned, if there are other questions within this division, feel free to answer. This is a spirited conversation for all of us. But what we've done differently within this PowerPoint is we had a very lively conversation with the steering committee. It was probably one of the best conversations we've had in this project. Lots of good feedback and clear, direct feedback, no vagueness. So what we did in this PowerPoint is that we walked through these questions. We have a call-out box in orange on the bottom of each of those slides that presents the picture of what steering committee talked about. And I think that will help guide and facilitate discussion with you, the Planning Commission. So let's dive into this. Division 4. Standards for specific uses. So previously we brought forth Division 3. That's general standards. Those are standards that apply citywide, regardless of the zoning district in which your property or parcel or business or home is located. That focuses on parking, shade, signage. Doesn't matter where you are, all of those apply. This now gets into standards for specific uses. So we're talking about standards that are applied to a specific use that are either permitted by right or require some sort of discretionary action. Typically, this is where you find accessory dwelling unit standards, if you have standards pertaining to drive-through facilities, car washes, etc. Now, that list of what those standards are for specific uses varies by jurisdiction. Not every jurisdiction wants to regulate uses the same. So the uses you have listed here within Division 4 are unique to Cathedral City. You won't find that exactly within Rancho Mirage, Palm Desert, or Palm Springs. So that is unique to each jurisdiction itself. Some of the topics that are covered within Division 4, I didn't list all of them because it's quite a long list, but it's just a flavor on here on the screen. We talk about temporary uses, density bonus, that's highly regulated by the state of California. Not much tweaking you can do within it, but if we want to get into that topic tonight, we can. Accessory uses, home occupations, this was one that perked the interest of the steering committee for sure. Retail sales, community gardens, etc. So I'm going to start to walk through these slides. I will say the last 2 topics we talk about, which have to do with RV parks and, ironically, vehicle sales, which was your earlier item this evening. Those 2 topics were not included in the original steering committee packet agenda. They were brought afterwards and were raised, but we're going to have that same conversation with the Planning Commission here tonight. So Hannah and I will alternate each of these questions, so I will start it off. So the first question we have here tonight has to do with breweries, distilleries, and wineries, and this is getting into the, yes.
If I could just ask, if possible, can you refer to the section in the document that you're referring to? Because typically I made all my notes to the sections in the document as well as the general questions.
Yes, I will pull that up simultaneously and we'll provide the section number. So this is going to pertain to section 9, 110.060.
Okay.
There we go. Are we good?
Yep.
Perfect. So this question has to do with breweries, distilleries, wineries, particularly looking at the tasting room portion of such facilities. So the question that we posed to steering committee and we're posing to the planning commission tonight is it reasonable to require that 100% of the beverages sold on site have to be manufactured on site? So for example, a brewery cannot offer beer that's not brewed at that facility or from a competitor or other similar product from another distributor? Or should there be more flexibility built in? Now, we brought this up with the steering committee. The steering committee noted and was pretty clear that they felt that this was highly restrictive. There was not enough flexibility built in. It's not uncommon to have, and this is not my opinion, but this is from the steering committee, not uncommon to have other products sold at a tasting room that aren't manufactured on site. Part of that discussion brought up on-site food. What if the food's not prepared there? How do you handle that? And so the steering committee felt that this restriction should not be included as part of the standard and that more flexibility need to be built in. But I'm going to hand it back to the chair because I'd like the planning commission to weigh in and provide feedback.
Thank you. Let me start with a comment, which I think I also saw in the notes from the steering committee. As I see it, the term tasting room has a specific meaning in ABC, and they have a specific definition of what can and can't be done in those areas. And I think we should defer simply to ABC. I don't see why we would try and usurp or change their requirements. We can't make it less restrictive than they already make it. They actually go to the point of determining how much you can pour per drink and how many drinks can be per day and so on. So if it really is a tasting room, it's already restricted by ABC. Other comments?
Well, with that proviso, I mean, if we're constrained, I guess there's not too much to say here, but when I read the steering committee comments, I was in agreement with them, as you were just saying, that 100% of beverages sold on site must be made there seemed strict, but I don't know if that's what ABC demands or not. But if it isn't what ABC demands, yes, that seems rather strict to me, especially because, let's say, Tasting Room A makes a Guinness-like beer, but they also make lager half a mile down the road. You should be able to sell the lager there as well if they're making it in another production facility. So I think 100% is too strict if we're allowed to have that flexibility.
I wasn't clear that we really meant tasting room, because if you look at the ABC's restrictions, they have conditions like all tastings must be free of charge.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's not what I was thinking of. Yeah.
I think at least in the context of the conversation we had in the steering committee, we were thinking more like the La Quinta Brewery, right? They make their own beer. They have a restaurant where they sell the beer. I mean, I think that was more the context we were talking about it in, not a tasting room as maybe defined so specifically like at a winery.
That's what I suspected, but in that case, we don't want to use that term in our code because it has a specific legal meaning as far as ABC is concerned.
Yeah. The vision I had in my head was definitely what the vice chair just said. I lived in North Park, San Diego, where there were a lot of craft breweries popping up, and that was the vision I had, and the idea of requiring that every product be made on that site seemed a bit ridiculous. So that was the assumption I was making in this part of the discussion.
Yeah, unless it actually meets the ABC restrictions, we shouldn't call it a tasting room. We should look at what we want to do in the code instead, yes.
I agree with you on the ABC.
Microphone.
Linking the ABC requirement, but on a more broad-based for the whole, for the whole evening, so I don't have to repeat it later, we need to cross-reference with, not just on this, but with the second dwelling unit law in the state code. We need to cross-reference with alcohol, tobacco, and firearms laws for the gun restrictions. We need to cross-reference with the FCC on the cell towers. So there needs to be those generic cross-references that go above and beyond what we can do, that are put on us. And the only other thing that I wanted to add, I think it was in the notes, but I don't see it in this orange box, was it's a good opportunity to give small businesses a chance that are food trucks. A lot of the microbreweries have like a food truck night.
Yep.
And we should definitely make allowances for that because as Commissioner Bedard is supportive of small business, we want to do whatever we can to foster small business.
And that was precisely the sort of thing you saw in San Diego, where I think the Hess Brewery, and right outside was a couple of food trucks. So yes, that's a good synergy to have.
I think in general, isn't part of your scope is to actually ensure that everything is up to the legal standard, isn't it? Or state laws, at least.
Yes. There's extensive cross-referencing, and then also your city attorney will also take a review of the entire code for legal adequacy as well.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Moving on.
The final thing I did want to bring up that was not mentioned in this box, but that the steering committee did discuss was within that section, in the development standard section. So this has to do under 9110.060B, and it's B4. There's limitations regarding on-site production and the amount of barrels, cases, gallons produced. The steering committee felt that the restriction there needed refinement, that in some cases it was limiting businesses coming in. And I just wanted to hear Planning Commission's thoughts on that as well. I can say within that section, it's broken up between a brewery, a winery, and a distillery, and there's different barrels, cases, and amount of gallons produced.
Right.
So those limitations would be applied.
Yeah, I'm not sure why we would want to restrict a business if they've got their setup, they've got their business plan, they've developed they've installed the equipment, whatever. Mm-hmm. Presumably they had a plan for what they wanted to produce, and I'm not sure why we're getting in the middle of that.
Yeah.
So
I absolutely agree. I mean, if they have the space and they are working within their means, then I don't understand why we would keep them small. As long as they're working within the square footage and the rules and the processing and all that type of stuff. If they overgrow, then they want to produce that much more, then they need to move.
I will say it's not an uncommon requirement to limit production. Typically, that's tied to the intensity of the use within specific areas. So if you're having a larger manufacturing or commercial beveraging within your commercial area, for example, we're talking about PCC, that may not be appropriate there, but it may be more appropriate within an industrial zone. So it's not an uncommon thing, but most codes are cutting red tape, and that's where best practice is heading to technically.
Like a craft brewery versus a Budweiser or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you just said makes a little more sense, though. I don't think we really contemplated that so much at steering committee, but I think if we wanted to put a limit on intensity, not production, or square footage or something like that, and then if they needed more square footage, they could be bigger in an industrial zone, that would be fine with me. I think we're just trying to avoid putting a hard limit, period, where if they're making, beer and now they hit their cap for the year, what are they supposed to do? Shut down for the rest of the year where they can't, it just seems like an arbitrary number. I understand why you're doing it, but maybe there's another way to get there.
Yeah, I think in general, I agree with the other commissioners that what we're trying to do is encourage business, not get in their way. So setting artificial or arbitrary limits on their business structure seems counterproductive for the city.
And from what I'm hearing, we can coordinate with city staff and discuss maybe an intensity base, something similar to what we worked with steering committee and planning commission when proposing intensity of retail uses in areas based on square footage type. So we can discuss that further.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Good evening. So for our second discussion question, we're going to be looking at certain limitations as proposed in the draft code on specific uses when they are in proximity to residential areas or uses. So specifically, we're going to be discussing potential limitations to car washes and bars. The two questions that we're looking for feedback on from the commission are in the draft code, the hours of operation for car washes are limited to between the hours of 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. This is intended to limit potential noise impacts to surrounding uses. And what we're looking for feedback on is if this limitation on hours of operation is reasonable, or should we allow for hours of operation that are earlier or later than what is currently proposed in the draft code? And additionally, if those limited hours of operation should vary based on if the use is located in a commercial or industrial area versus in proximity to a residential area. The second item that we are looking for feedback on regarding this subject is bars and spacing between bars. In the draft code, as it stands right now, we require a 500-foot separation between new bar developments. And we are curious if the commission finds that this spacing, as proposed in the draft, is producing the intended outcome of limiting the over-proliferation of such uses, or over-concentration, of such uses in a specific area that could lead to negative impacts. Or should we instead focus more on operational hour limits to mitigate such impacts? When we discussed this topic with the steering committee noted some concern that the limited hours of operation for car washes was too constraining on developments, and that hours of operation should be more flexible for car washes. And then in the discussion regarding bars, steering committee members noted that the ABC already regulates spacing between bars, and that the 500-foot separation is excessive in addition to the requirements already set in place by the ABC. And the committee also thought that potentially a better way to regulate such uses and the potential negative impacts they could cause on surrounding uses would be to establish performance standards that would ensure compatibility with other surrounding land uses. So with that, I will hand it back to the chair to facilitate the discussion with the commission.
And yes.
And before we hand it back to the chair, I just want to elaborate that this question is not tied to a specific section within the division. It's discussing hours of operation for a variety of uses.
Right.
The two questions that Hannah posed to the commission on the screen, those are just examples of two uses that were discussed to gauge interest. So different hours of operation can be applied on a variety of uses that abut or are adjacent to residential.
And I think that my first comment was that, again, we shouldn't unreasonably restrict business, but we might want to restrict business on a couple of factors, one of which is noise, and things like a car wash plant does produce a lot of noise, particularly from the blowers. I noted actually that I have a feeling the code that we have here that is already documented probably isn't being met by some of our local car washes, for example, particularly on the basis of noise. So I'm not sure how we give you the right answer on this question, because I would say, if a car wash is in a commercial area, or if it's a car wash for trucks, for example, an industrial area, it can operate any time it wants. I'm not worried. But if it's within some distance, and we've been using 500 and 1,000 a lot, but say within 500 feet of a residential district, we would be more cautious about noise and inconvenience to residents.
And I think what you're proposing and laying out here in the rationale of thought is very similar to where the steering committee was falling, where on the car wash example, the steering committee felt if you had it in an industrial, primarily commercial area and it wasn't near residential, an 8 to 8 restriction seems excessive, especially since, obviously we're here in a desert environment. People might be up earlier to go get their car washed or be out later when it's not as hot. But if it is within close proximity or adjacent to residential, there should be some performance standards that do mitigate that noise or use of the property. So yes, that's what you're saying, Chair, is exactly the type of information that we're looking to get. If there are specific uses that you can think of through your review of permits or applications that have come before you where you think actually there should have been some expanded hours or there should be performance standards because it was a sensitive use or near other sensitive uses, that would be good feedback to provide us and city staff tonight. You're just not limited to the 2 notes here. These are just examples.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I think one of the things that we discussed
Microphone.
at length that maybe didn't get reflected here is when it came to bars, there's a difference between us. I think bars are different than they were 20, 30 years ago. And I certainly wouldn't want to have a distance requirement between like an Applebee's and Bennigan's or something like that. I don't know if you had Bennigan's in California, but it's like an Applebee's wannabe. But we don't want restaurants that have bars to have this distance requirement because that's just getting in the way. So I wanted to just clarify that, and that's all.
In relation to the issue of separation between bars, in that specific example, my understanding is that is an ABC thing, because we recently had an example of a bar that was applying for its liquor license with ABC, and it came back from ABC, no, you can't, because there's an over-concentration of bars, and they do it at a census tract level or something, and they say there's X bars in this census tract level, no. But in that specific example, they were able to come to the city council, and the city council determined that's okay, and so they were able to proceed with their application. So that seems like an okay process for us to use, rather than saying they must be 50 feet apart or 100 feet apart. That there's a determination made, then the city council will ultimately say, we're okay with that level of concentration. As it relates to bars, anyway, there's a process already.
Anybody can go and do what you just said if they're determined through the criteria that ABC has per census tract. Anybody can go back to the city, and different cities handle it differently. I'm not sure in Cathedral City whether it goes to council or not, or it goes to the city manager. But anybody can say, I want to appeal this overconcentration.
Yeah.
Yes, Vice Chair.
A new comment, since you just said that if we had thoughts on specific uses that we thought should have some conditions on them. I was kind of concerned when we had that item come before us last month, I believe, which was vehicle repair on Date Palm, and we did have a member of the public who did mention that vehicle repair can be very loud, and it is right next to a residential district. And I asked, as one of my questions to staff, if we had conditions for hours on vehicle repair as a use, and they said we did not. So I would say that I would be interested in that, because that was my primary concern and something that still bothers me. So just throwing it out there. I don't know if any other commissioners have the same.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Going back to eating and drinking, so we're at 9.1.10.110, it's C2 in that section, but it talks about the opening hours for bars, and again, legally it can be 6 a.m. to 2 a.m. And it suggests a 10 a.m. start. Now, I don't know whether this is a particular trend here. I know it's a trend in other places where bars are actually getting into food and, breakfast foods, coffee, stuff like that. So I don't want to restrict that either. If they want to be out there at 6 a.m., serving coffee and croissant,
When you say that's legal, is that ABC or what? do you mean by-
ABC limits, or the state
6
requires
a.m. to 2 a.m.
the licensing laws are from 6 a.m. till 2 a.m. So I would simply say, we might set an upper limit of, but 8 a.m. to, a lower limit like 8 a.m. instead of 6 if it's near a residential area, but still give them that benefit of getting early morning trade so that they can make money.
I think if you were going to say if they serve food, then they could have an earlier opening hour. I'd be fine with that. But I think if you only serve alcohol, I don't think there's any reason a bar needs to be open at 6 a.m. if you are not providing food. I think that, I don't know, I just think that could have negative repercussions. And then I would say also on the other end, I think in a downtown, in certain of our zones, being open until 2 a.m. makes total sense. In other zones, maybe midnight's the limit. So, again, I think there should be a little bit of some definitions here in the fine tuning.
Yeah, and I mean, if we want the bachelorette parties to come to town,
No.
then we need the 2 a.m. closing.
In the commercial neighborhood zone, that I think Commissioner Mead is referring to, that should probably have restrictions more than what ABC provides. However, I don't recall exactly why I investigated this when I first moved here, but there's a lot of commerce at bars between 6 and 8, and I went and checked out a lot of businesses in Cathedral City and Palm Springs, and I was very surprised at how many people were there at that hour. So I think other than the neighborhood district, we should stick to the ABC rules. And if there's a problem with that, after we adopt, let's say we adopt the code with the 6 to 2 a.m. for most of our zones, if that turns into a problem, we could adjust that, because there's always going to be an adjustment period after you adopt the zoning. But I think we should stick with ABC.
I think if there are individual problems, then the police department can raise an issue with ABC. I mean, if it was causing problems.
I meant individual. What I meant was sometimes after you approve a zoning code, you have to do a cleanup. I'm not talking about a specific business that doesn't follow the rules, but sometimes you find that things that you made sense when you approved it don't. If for some reason it doesn't make sense to have 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., then we can go back and fix that later. But, so that's what I was trying to say.
So I'm always looking for future type of things. And one of the trends in retail and hospitality is multi-use businesses. So businesses that may do a coffee house and breakfast in the morning, and then they have a light lunch, and then maybe have the afternoon music venue, and then they have the bar sort of roll out, and then it becomes a dance club, and then it becomes open until 2 a.m. as a nightclub, as one entity that's being run often by the same people or different participants under the same roof. Was any of that discussed in steering community at all? Because that's a major trend.
I think it falls under what we generally talked about, and the 6 a.m. to the 6 a.m. to 2
So
a.m.
really determines on the area, like in commercial zones, not an issue, but in how it impacts neighborhoods?
I think if you were in a retail district, not a neighborhood district, but a retail in our PCC zone, if we continue to call it that in the morning, if you want to be like a Starbucks, and then in the evening have beer and wine and live music, there's ways to do that. And yeah, I think we were supportive of being as flexible as possible.
Right. And I think there's a lot to be said for businesses actually sorting out what works for them as a business. People are not going to open at 6 a.m. if they don't get customers till 10. They're going to adjust their hours accordingly. So.
And I think a way to address what Commissioner Bedard's talking about may be the refining of the definition of an eating and drinking establishment. I think so it expands it a bit more so it's clear that I mean, the example you gave it would fall under that. If it's a coffee shop in the morning and they have tea at noon and they have a wine bar at 5, and they're still serving food, it's still eating and drinking establishment. ABC would still regulate it. It wouldn't prohibit it. Where it might get a little washy is if it turned into a nightclub in the evening and it dropped. That's something that we would have to talk with staff to see how that would work. It is a common thing now to have multi-use within the same structure or the same business. I'd want to do a little bit more research into that and work with city staff and the legal team to make sure that we're ironing that out correctly. But it is something that is common.
Cool, yeah, and there's a location that's doing that right now very successfully in downtown India, where they become a late night nightclub. You know, it's like croissants in the morning, and it's doing very well.
There's 2 follow-ups, if I may, Chair. One is for legal. I know the state was looking at expanding the allowability for drinking establishments. At one point, there was a proposal to go to 4 a.m., not 2. Did that legislation pass?
That would be something we would have to confirm. I'm not aware of that right now, that it changed.
Okay.
Cathedral City was actually one of the pilot cities.
Right.
There were, I think, 5 or 6 cities, and for some reason, we were one of the pilot cities that was going to be allowed to go to 4 a.m. Or we were.
Yeah.
Because it was right at the time that I moved here.
That's why you moved.
And yes, yes, exactly. That's why I moved. No, but I remember being shocked because it just seemed like such an odd choice since we're not known for having
I think
lots of late night bars.
the touristy kinds of places, I don't know that it got approved, but the tourist-related places that had heavy tourism were the ones that wanted to have that 4 a.m. So it was like the whole valley and Santa Barbara and the Mission District in San Diego, places
Well,
like that.
So we can check on that.
The second question is a follow-up to Vice Chair Mead. And you'd mentioned about there should be some hours of operation applied to this vehicle service and types of uses. It would help staff and the consultant team is to have you expand on that a little bit more. Are there hours that you're thinking would be most appropriate, or some performance standards that come to mind when you think of the use?
I mean, I think it's really, my concern is really more when it's close to residential. So when I think of most of the places on Ramon Road, I'm pretty sure a lot of them open pretty early, like 6 or 7. If your car breaks down on your way to work, or that's the only time you can take your car in before you go to work, that makes complete sense to me. But I think for that one project we were looking at, I mean, it was them, there was a little street, and then homes. So and maybe on almost both sides. So I think maybe, if it's within a certain footage of, like we said, the 500 feet or 1,000 feet or something that.
Well, that situation is pretty much dominant on Ramon Road, too. The streets directly behind most of the businesses are residential.
Yeah, that is true, actually.
And
But
that feeds, I'm sorry,
No,
but
yeah, go ahead.
it just feeds into something else that came up at that discussion, which was that in general, that area seems to suffer, that it's fairly run down. So I don't know if we've considered whether, in fact, certain businesses need to be moved to other zones for approval.
Well, I think what you could do is you could have performance standards about loud noises, like when you refit tires, there's a loud air pressure noise. I'm not a car repair person, but there's another pounding noise that they make when they're doing something. So you're gonna have to find out those things on your own. But I think what you could do is, even on Ramon Road, you could have standards that take place from this point forward. And let's say Firestone left their location on Ramon Road then when a new place goes in, they would have to comply with whatever the standard is. And they can also do soundproofing. So the AQMD has very specific standards for when you have a paint booth, so that the emissions don't get out. So we could make standards that they insulate the sound, so that it's lower and it doesn't get out to the surrounding area as much.
Well, I think we just need to set a property boundary standard for noise, just as we do for residential.
Well, it'd be hard to see. The thing is if you do that, the staff, when they get it as a business license for a permitted use, they're not going to know like how to enforce that. It'll be difficult for them to do that without like studies and things. But I think if you do it by saying if you do this, this, and this, then you need to do this.
So I think this is an item for consideration, noise control for auto body and auto shop businesses. So, okay.
Home occupations.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's touch on home occupations. I mentioned this was the lively conversation with steering committee. Lots of good ideas, lots of great opinions. It was very enjoyable from the consultant standpoint. So there's a few questions we have here. And the home occupation section, let me pull it up here. It is section 9110-130 if you're curious in Division 4. So the two questions that we have for Planning Commission, one has to do with parking and whether for businesses accepting customers, should there be an option that they provide one off-street parking space available for customer parking. Another question has to do with cottage food operations, otherwise known as CFOs, and whether there should be different standards applied between a CFO and a home occupation, whether they should be viewed differently, or should standards, and one such standard that was brought up at least to the steering committee is whether there could be additional employees permitted as part of it and whether that's appropriate. Now, the steering committee, when evaluating the home occupation discussion, kind of expressed mixed opinions. And I'll start with the parking one. There were concerns with requiring parking as a commercial use within a residential area. It was brought up that could open the door to ADA requirements, which if you can imagine now ADA requirements being applied from a commercial standpoint against residential within a neighborhood, cost prohibitive, and didn't know if we wanted to open that door. And that whether you really needed to require parking for a home occupation. There's street parking, you can park on your driveway. Then there came the discussion from the steering committee about whether a home occupation can have an employee, more than one, on site, whether you can have visitors, how do you work with deliveries? And so as part of this discussion, there were mixed opinions on whether you should allow allow patrons to come to the home or to the site. If you did, should there be a limitation? Part of this discussion was looking at limited customer visits, as noted here in the box on the screen, such as one patron per hour. How do we pick and choose which home occupations should be allowed? There was a discussion on equity behind that and fairness. If you allow a music teacher, why not a CPA? Why not a home groomer? So this just kind of gives you a flavor. It was a great discussion, and I'm hoping that we can have that with you, the Planning Commission, tonight as well. So I'll hand it back to the chair and open it up for question and discussion.
Thank you. I thought the parking was probably the easier question of the two, which is, I don't see why we would do that. The code already, as written, says that if you are a home office, you can have one customer per hour, one at a time. So that's one car parking outside your house, which is no different to the plumber or the electrician or anybody else that needs to park outside your house temporarily. And they're only allowed to be there for an hour, so it's a temporary parking situation. So I just don't see that one as a real issue. Anyone else on parking?
No.
I would agree with that.
Absolutely agree.
Yeah. Now, everyone's going to disagree with me on the other one. Or some people, I'm sure, will. But anyway, if you start adding employees to a home office, a home business, then you're beginning to create a real business, which should really be in its own location. it comes up the question of all the requirements for an employee in terms of insurance and so on, ADA compliance for the employee. I just don't see a case for saying, whether or not you're a home groomer or an accountant or whatever, having any employees other than the people that already live in the premises. So that would be my position. However, other comments?
That's a neat way of getting around the Pandora's box you would otherwise open. I was initially kind of partial, like maybe one employee wouldn't be the end of the world, but I kind of take on board what you just said, that it does open up a bunch of issues in relation to liability, ADA, and so on. So,
Commissioner McPhail, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I'm just not hearing you very good. I just want to make sure that the microphone is pointed towards you.
yeah, I was just basically concurring with the chair's comment on maybe it's best to keep it to one employee for these sorts of businesses, because it opens up a whole host of issues that I think would be rather difficult to regulate in a single-family home or a residential environment. So I do kind of agree.
May I step in? Because I think this would be a good question for legal, because I believe that as a CFO, you're already allowed 1 to 2 employees the most, I think. And I don't believe ADA kicks in until you have over, I'm surprised this was even brought up, because I know as far as like my online website for selling products, my website doesn't have to be ADA compliant until I'm over 25 employees. And I believe that is the standard. So it's kind of funny we're even talking about ADA for 1 or 2 employees, because if I'm correct, and I'm looking for some clarification on that, that none of that would even apply. So I'm curious, why was it talked about?
I will say you're incorrect about the
Am I?
website, because I do web design for a business, and I have clients who are sole proprietors who have gotten sued. So that standard doesn't apply to websites. I don't know about the standard
I
for
just met
offline.
with a lawyer, and the lawyer told me
No,
that.
they're totally wrong.
Oh,
Yeah.
What are lawyers?
all right, lawyer.
No, if I could, I don't know that I have the answer directly to that question, but it is something, obviously, the purpose of this whole discussion is to consider, hey, considerations for ADA were brought up. Is that even a factor here? And the other thing, too, is, I think the purpose is also to kind of maybe differentiate between general home occupation and then possibly what would apply for cottage food operations. Because when you think of home occupations, the goal, at least in case law, has always been, does the occupation change the residential character of the neighborhood, right? So if you're talking employees, for example, if you're allowing 1 employee or limiting, in this case, like to 1 employee, the argument is, will 1 extra vehicle that may be parked in a driveway change the residential character of the neighborhood? Probably not. If you're allowing 5, that may change it, right? At every day you may have certain people, 5 different cars parking from 8 to 5 in the afternoon. So the consideration really is as far as like the residential character for home occupations. But I'm happy to look into the ADA aspect, and we can kind of work towards that. I'm not sure if you have any other comments related to that.
The ADA discussion came up from a steering committee member. And so part of this is to just be transparent and provide what the steering committee's thoughts were.
That had to do with parking only.
It had to do with parking, but part of this is, yes, it will go through legal review and we'll check all of it. We're just trying to provide as much feedback that we heard as possible.
I just have one thing, which I think, so my husband and I have an LLC. If we became an S Corp, we could both make ourselves employees of the S Corp. We're a home-based business. So from legal and tax purposes, we would be 2 employees in 1 home. We both do website stuff. There's no one's coming to the house. We're not going anywhere. So I think if, it becomes a little problematic. I think where maybe the concern is if you have an employee who's coming to the house, right? And I personally think if we're going to allow CFOs, or if the law already allows CFOs to do that, that we shouldn't play favorites and say someone else couldn't do that as well. I think in the interest of fairness, but.
I think that we say, or I think the draft said, maybe I'm wrong, the employees additional to those resident.
Oh, okay.
So I think you're covered, but anyway, no, I take the point. Yes.
Mr. Chair, it really was a good discussion, as Brent said that it was, and it was such a good discussion that I kind of changed my mind. In the notes, it says, however, one member was against customer visits. So that was me at the beginning of the conversation, but not at the end.
You didn't need to confess.
I changed my mind on things that were said about fairness and what Commissioner Mead just said. And most of all, if the CFO already allows the employee, why, just like Commissioner Mead just said, why should we then restrict the tax preparer for having an assistant, there, or anybody, that would have one employee?
So CFOs do allow one employee.
Yeah, they do. So why would, so if it's already happening for them, it's just really unfair to restrict it to the others. And then I think there was a general consensus among the committee about the 1 per hour. And that's kind of where I changed my mind, because I was against any kind of customer coming to the home for the sanctity of a residential area. So I just wanted to say that in all fairness.
So CFO regulations, as we understand them, do not talk about ADA parking or any being triggered or anything like that.
And I think we just need to cross-reference again with the CFO requirements and make those for generically for the other businesses.
I think where it gets a little tricky, though, and I think we talked about this in steering committee, was multifamily and not wanting to be more restrictive in multifamily, but does it bring up more complications in terms of if you have a 12-unit apartment building and 10 of those units are home occupations and they all have one employee, does it become more complicated? Because when I'm thinking about this issue, I'm thinking about it residential, single-family neighborhoods, and it's like, oh, there's plenty of street parking, and it's not going to be a problem. But in a downtown, more urban environment, in multifamily, it might be different, and I don't know if that's worth discussing.
That would also, it raises the same question, of course, if you've got an apartment building with 20 apartments and every one of them has a home business and they have one customer coming to visit every hour, it's going to get really busy. So
most apartment projects and condos don't allow, they don't allow the home occupation permits. They don't allow them in a lot of, like, like when I lived in Redlands, we had like 600 unit apartment complexes, and they didn't allow people to have a business that they were running out of the home, not through the city code, but through their own rules and regulations.
HOA.
And I live in a 68 unit complex, and we don't allow HOAs, and we don't allow I forgot what we called that, the vacation rentals. So, it's, some of it would be handled by, the individuals, but I think as Commissioner Mead said, we need to look into, there's a difference between what we were just talking about for the single-family residential or even a duplex and a 12-unit apartment complex or bigger.
So consideration for staff.
Shirley, one way that it was approached in another city I worked in is if the property was not owned by the HOP applicant, they had to get permission from the property owner that it would be permissible. And that might be a mechanism to self-regulate as well in multifamily complexes or even single family.
Sounds good.
If I may jump in here too, I would agree with Interim Director Molina on this. I have seen a code that tried to limit it in multifamily and ran into a fairness and equitable issue of,
Right.
Let's say an individual can't afford a single family home, then they can't have a home occupation themselves. I do think the sign off, and I have written standards where there is a sign off required. I think that would be the best way to handle it and let the property owner make that determination. But from the city's standpoint, it is allowing flexibility with home occupations.
Right. Yeah, sounds good. On home occupations, there were some other things that I noted which aren't in your questions. So The first was, there's no mention of MECO in here.
What?
So
The restaurant,
yeah,
the food service.
yeah, MEHKO. Perhaps we don't pronounce it
We
MECO.
talked about it
I
as a
don't know.
residential food
But,
service.
but anyway, I mean, that's typically a very different home-based business.
The city doesn't have any review authority on Amico,
Okay.
so that may be why it's not in our code.
It's interesting because, well, I'm not disagreeing with you. I think I remember that from our previous discussion. I did do some research that showed cities had found there were still limitations they can put around those businesses. So I think it's worth at least doing some research on that. The sorts of things that I found, and I'm not suggesting we do all these, that it's got to be confirmed it's the primary residence, not a secondary or vacation residence. That there are no accessory kitchens on the property. And I can send you the list of things I found. So just generally, are there things that we would want to restrict for those operations that we legally can restrict? And I'm assuming that basically things like an unlicensed childcare thing, that wouldn't be allowed anyway. We wouldn't get a business license for that.
4 units on a property.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you. Oh, yes.
This is kind of in relation to one of the questions, I think, that came up from, that was part of our packet tonight from a member of the public. And I think it's in this section, and it was in relation to ADUs and JADUs and the building codes regarding sprinklers. And I think in the text it mentions that they do not require, ADUs and JADUs do not require sprinklers. And I was wondering, is that a state regulation that you don't have to have sprinklers in those units, or does the city have latitude on that?
Did we jump ahead to?
I thought it was in this section, the 110.130.
Home occupations?
Well, I think it's in 110.130, unless I've gone cross-eyed. I might be wrong on that. I don't have it in front of me.
I don't know.
Different section, but
I think ADU and JADU considerations are separate.
I thought it was all under
It was in section 030, so it was early
030,
on.
not 130, sorry.
Oh. We can come back to that. But,
Yes, yes.
Let's stay with the plan. So nothing else on home occupations?
There is just one more item I wanted to talk about, and we're getting back to some hour restrictions here. Within the draft, it does have hour restrictions for deliveries. Deliveries was something that was discussed with steering committee about what justifies a delivery and should there be hour restrictions replaced on it. Part of the discussion compared your typical Amazon, which drops off as early as 4 a.m. or as late as midnight. And so I wanted to raise this, should we have an hour restriction on delivery service?
you're up against a Goliath to do that. I mean, Uber Eats and all the food services, I see them delivering to my neighbor across the street. I don't think they even use their kitchen, and it's pretty much 24/7, but it doesn't cause any disruptions in the neighborhood to have.
I guess there's a distinction between, a large truck rolling up with, pallets of stuff, which seems unlikely for these home-based businesses, and something more like an Amazon van, which will turn up and drop off one parcel. So I'm not sure how we'd regulate that.
Yeah, and ultimately, how would it be any different than if you were remodeling your backyard and you have a whole bunch of giant landscaping vehicles and trucks full of gravel? If you're, I don't know that I think that was the concern that we had, is that by restricting that, we're putting a restriction on the home occupation business that it can't be applied to the person living there if they didn't have the home occupation business, right? Because they could still do that if they, so it becomes just a weird regulation to enforce.
I think what we had said at the steering committee was that you should allow deliveries as would be allowed for a normal residential business. But I think what you were just talking about, having pallets of gravel, isn't what a normal residential use would have.
Right.
a delivery for their, but you should be able to get Uber Eats and Amazon and UPS and FedEx. And those are going to be early and late because that's just the way it is now. But I think it should be like what a normal residence would get.
Was there any discussion about the trend of delivery through drones? Like, because drones are very loud and very disruptive, and we're already at that point, not here in the valley, but in the San Fernando Valley, where they are becoming a significant delivery.
That did not
But how
come
would
up.
it be any different for just a resident versus a business?
I
Would
don't
you
think
wanna
it would
put
be.
any-
I'm just saying, was it discussed and
No,
the
we
noise and stuff like that? Like one of the Amazon new electric vehicle trucks, you don't even hear them. That's a very different thing as far as disrupting a neighborhood. But a drone dropping over your head into your front yard or your backyard is a lot more invasive to the neighbors around.
Do you think Uber Eats could just deliver a burger and fries and drop it off on your porch with a drone?
Eventually, they're doing packages with Amazon already. They're doing pizzas.
We did not discuss that.
That was not brought up. To be honest, I'm not even sure how you would regulate that. There's
Right.
probably some airspace issues. There's a lot of stuff, and you have an international airport right on the fringe in your backyard. So there's probably a lot of considerations, but it wasn't brought up. But it is a trend. We are seeing it in other parts of California and urban areas as well. So
Right, and the delivery trucks, the little tiny, I don't know if you've seen them, the little tiny 3x3 or 2x3 little trucks that Uber Eats uses also now to just drive remotely down your street and drop it off at your door. And
Okay.
yeah.
I think going back to the drones, again, it has to do with cross-referencing. So if we were to say anything about drones, I think the FCC would regulate that because you have to get an FCC license to have a drone or to use it. And I don't think that they allow them to just fly over residential areas. But again, there would be overall regulations coming from the federal government on that we could look into.
And I think that's something that we can discuss more with city staff, and I think legal will weigh in into part of that as well. I don't know if Associate Planner Schultz has anything else to add.
I guess the only thing I would probably add to this is that I love these debates because you guys are such great planners. You're thinking 20, 30, 40 years into the future, and this is great. And it might only be 5 years into the future when this stuff actually starts happening here. I think at the time that we start to see that, the answers will become more apparent to us, and we'll have that discussion at that time. I think it's hard to contemplate or anticipate all of the potential impacts until we start seeing what that looks like on the ground. Yeah.
Yes, let's
It'll
remember
probably-
it's going to be a living document when it's finished. So,
Yes.
okay. So before we move, yes.
I was just going to say, after this section, could we take a 5-minute break?
I was just about to poll the commission. If you would like a 5-minute recess? Okay, 5-minute recess. Thank you.
We can. Staff is going to discuss that topic, so I would probably wait until.
Yeah, I'd like to get through your question list first, and then we can go over the other items, of which there are many. So, okay, so the next one you had was retail sales.
So this question relates to neighborhood markets. So this is really like a corner store kind of market, or a small neighborhood market that you would have that would mainly be intended to serve nearby residential uses, and would just sell, typical everyday ingredients, beverages, things like that. In the draft code, as proposed, there is a maximum 50% allowed area that would be allowed to sell alcoholic or tobacco sales. In addition, it's not listed on the slide here, but there is also a minimum 20% sales area that we would be required for staple ingredients. So think fruits, vegetables, rice, canned goods, things of that sort. Oh, and apologies also. This is section 9.110.160. So that is as proposed in the draft code at the moment. When we discussed this with the steering committee unanimously agreed that the percentage restrictions should be flipped. So there should be a 50% minimum for staple food ingredients and a 20% maximum for alcohol and tobacco sales area. We are looking for feedback on if the commission agrees with this, and if you have any other thoughts on neighborhood markets.
Well, in my case, I think that my decision or my thought was the same as the steering committee's, in that I would say you flip the numbers and have 20% for alcohol and tobacco, and the rest divided between groceries, staples, and other items. So, anyway, other.
I agree. We hear so much about food deserts and
Right.
underprovided neighborhoods. I think flipping seems like a good idea to me.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree on it. And from what I know of these small mom-and-pop neighborhood stores, the majority of their income comes from vices. So I don't know if those, yes, it's great to say, we want to have these stores and we want to have these businesses and they should be like this. And the chance of them staying in business, if they have that small, I don't know. I would suggest maybe looking into that, what a feasibility would be on a business actually being able to stay. Yes, Danielle? Oh, no, you were right there. You were like, so I was just wondering what the feasibility is of the business being able to stay in operation.
I would give you an example of the reason we chose our house is we knew a grocery outlet was going in on the corner of Date Palm and 30th, which is walking distance from our house, which is great. For us, it's a neighborhood market. If you go to that grocery outlet, I'd say 95% is food, household staples, household items, cleaning products, snacks, fruit, produce, whatever. And they've got one wall and maybe 3 small shelves that are wine, liquor, and beer.
Is that a neighborhood market, though? Because that's not how I envision a neighborhood
I'm not
market.
saying it is, but I'm saying that they managed to, I think the service they're providing is very similar to a neighborhood market. And so I think it theoretically should be possible, because that's what I was thinking about this. Like, they do sell alcohol, they do sell wine, they have great deals on wine, they advertise it a lot, they do buy one, get one and all that kind of stuff. So they clearly make money on it, but I just think that we want to make sure that it's neighborhood serving. One of the complaints we had in LA when I lived there is that a new CVS would go in and they'd say, we're going to sell products that serve the neighborhood. And the people who lived nearby there, they couldn't get milk, they couldn't get eggs. There was nowhere in the Hollywood area that they could walk to get basic staples. So I think we just want to make sure that we're providing for the community what.
So what's the definition of a neighborhood market then? Because in my mind, when I think of a neighborhood market, I'm thinking of an old house that the garage was converted into a store and it's 200 square feet.
No.
So I'm curious what that is.
I think a neighborhood market is more like the Outpost Market, or a 7-Eleven. Those are more of a neighborhood market kind of thing. In Redlands, they had a lot of, embedded into the residential area, they had a commercial use that had been there for 50 years. And it focused on the staples that you're talking about. You could buy eggs and milk there, and you could buy cigarettes too. But I think a good example in Cathedral City is the Outpost Market, the 7-Eleven that's near the Walmart, and things such, or the Circle K, either, we have two now.
And we approved a store off Ramon, a very small, rather not ideal building. And I can't remember whether we had any discussion about liquor versus produce at that point.
Are those actually neighborhood markets? Because they're all on very residential, high density. I always think of a neighborhood market as like on the corner of a residential street, there's a little shop. So
let
I'm
me-
curious as what the definition.
Exactly. We're working in the dark a bit here because we don't have the definition that is attached to this term in the code.
I can clarify. The neighborhood market is meant to, it has a maximum square footage size of 5,000 square feet, so it's small. It's meant to be embedded within a neighborhood. Typically, we're not talking like a convenience style store like a 7-Eleven. Which has a greater balance of what was kind of drafted here, not so much where the steering committee was heading. Typically, you find these neighborhood markets in more older established areas. The example I gave to steering committee was the grid in Sacramento, Midtown, downtown has corner markets in 100% residential neighborhoods. Sometimes they're converted homes. They have hour limitations. They're more focused on goods and necessities than they are alcohol.
Right.
Do we have anything like that in Cathedral City, that definition? Anyone
I
know?
was going to ask staff, but
Are we zoned for anything like that?
We don't. We are not, and we do not. So, and I think I'm going to tag on here. So typically, yes, the neighborhood market generally falls in that 5,000 square foot. It isn't to say that we couldn't change that. And we've talked about zoning by intensity and traffic counts and things of that nature, so that as we zone for things, something that might go on, say, a residential corner, what would be the appropriate scale and size? What would be the product mix for something like that? That's going to be different from, say, something that's on Ramon or Date Palm Drive, which is going to be more of a convenience store. There's a difference. So convenience stores often sell lottery tickets. They sell alcohol. They sell prepared convenience foods like hot dogs. They'll sell, tobacco products, soft drinks, things like that. Some of those staples, but mostly not the things like what Vice Chair Mead was talking about. The staples that if I'm going to the grocery store with my recyclable bag, I want to be able to bring home bananas, milk, eggs, and yogurt.
So in terms of the code, I think it actually mentions at some point that neighborhood stores, markets would be allowed on a corner adjacent to a residential lot. Is that correct? Am I thinking of the right reference?
But you can
Yeah.
walk,
So-
you can walk to.
So it sounds to me like in order to satisfy Commissioner Bedard's question, we probably need a little bit more research into what a neighborhood market looks like and how successful they are in terms of what they're selling.
So two things I can add to that, and we can certainly research that and bring you something back. Give us some good guidance, and we'll bring that back for your next review. One of the reasons that this is in here is that we recognize in a lot of these smaller footprint, the economics, and I'm sorry, I'm always going to come back to the economics and the viability and feasibility, right? I'm going to look at Vice Chair Mead here just for a second because she always talks about her neighborhood. But let's just imagine that on her street corner, there's a neighborhood market. And it's very small, and maybe they sell the bananas that are less cost competitive than if you went down to, say, the grocery outlet. The reason that a lot of places rely on using tobacco and alcohol is to supplement, and make the bottom line work. So that's why this metric or this ratio usually comes up in there. And it's a question of, okay, if we ratchet that number down, we might have to change the size or the footprint of these. We also recognize that once we start changing that footprint, it might not be as desirable on Vice Chair Mead's corner now, right? So we want to find where that balance point is, and that's why I think I'm trying to push you all or encourage you to really give us good guidance so that we can bring something back that you feel comfortable with, and we can tweak that a little bit when we get in that workshop in June.
And I think that we don't have sufficient information about what makes a business like that viable. If I look at Bodegas in New York, I mean, they do a lot of fresh food and everything else, toilet brushes, whatever you need is going to be in the bodega somewhere. But we don't see that in Cathedral City. We don't have that type of store. I would be willing to go higher than 20% for those goods if it satisfies the requirement to make the business viable. I don't think 50% is the right number. It's still too high because that makes it into a liquor store in my mind. And so it's somewhere in between, whatever would support the business being successful.
And that's a great point. You know, we might not have those here. We don't have any of the density as New York would have, even outside of New York City, right? Even the suburbs. But I think you're touching on something really important. I don't know what that number is, and we might not hit the magic number, but back to your point before the break, it's a living document. You know, if we put 25 in the code, and we're not getting any applications for it, but we're getting inquiries for it, that gives us really good data to bring back to you all at some point and say, you know what, this number might be too low.
Okay.
Let's look at a different number.
I think, you know, one of the things, all five of us seem to have a different idea of what a neighborhood store is. I don't know that the definition that you're using is one that exists in Cathedral City. I have seen it like in Mecca, where there's a place called, I went there, I had to go to the Santa Rosa Community Council, and there was a place called Kennedy's. It said it was a delicatessen, but it really wasn't. But it fit what you're talking about. It sold liquor and cigarettes, but it also sold cooked food, like the bodega you're talking about. And then it had all sorts of staples there. I don't know if it had toilet brushes. But it fit the definition. I don't know that we have that here, but I do know that you could walk to the Circle K from Eagle Canyon and get a lot of the staples that people have been talking about tonight. And I know that the Outpost Market near where I live, I could walk there and get a lot of things that I might have just run out of. I don't know if I'd want to go there at 1 a.m, but it fits the definition of what you're talking about. I think one of the things that you need to think about, though, in a neighborhood market that sells liquor, especially in a neighborhood, is that they do not sell individual beers, because that's a huge problem here, and the police can fill you in on that. You should have to buy a six-pack, because what happens is the homeless people and the day laborers buy the single beers and then they hang out, and that's not a good thing.
So one last thing on that is I used to design a lot of these sort of bodega-style retail spaces, and what was in for being for sale was always determined about the neighborhood. And a lot of these stores needed to have mixed-use retail, so they would be a gift shop that was combined with an art gallery that may have had a rack of clothing or something of that sort, and then had a refrigerator area with all fresh vegetables and eggs and different things of that sort. So, like, if you're going to define what a neighborhood market is, what's in that market, what the proprietor is going to sell is, what they're going to need to sell is what keeps their door open.
Okay.
So can you have mixed use type of blends?
Mr. Chair, I'll just offer this just as a reference point. So
Yes.
I just found this on, this is on the Palm Springs Post. This was actually taken from 2021, the Tower Market. This was right before the construction of the Cathedral City Tower Market. 5,343 square foot, what they call a neighborhood market, and fuel station. It was approximately 2.5 acres. Minimum of 15% display space of the store will be devoted to perishable groceries, dairy, meats, and produce. Minimum 30% devoted to other staple foods. Maximum of 20% of shelf space instead of sales devoted to alcohol, and at least 5 shopping carts available to customers.
Right. So I think, we can't give you the absolute definition here. What we need now, you've heard what we have to say about, the need for that. We need to hear about that at a future date when you've had time to talk through what exactly it is. And maybe there's more than one definition that's needed. Maybe there's neighborhood market and the convenience store is a different thing. I don't know. But
Mr. Chair, one last thing, I'll keep it short. You mentioned the Tower Market, and I was just thinking about that. So the Tower Market on Date Palm, if you've ever been in there, they sell fresh chicken, cut up chicken. You can buy a cooked sandwich there. They have everything that we've been talking about. I think it's about 7,500 square feet. So that might be the newer definition of a neighborhood market. So.
all right. Okay.
So just so the commission is aware, there is question 5 on the screen, and then we have question 6, and that concludes the questions that we have. I know the chair's alluded to some more topics that the commission might like to go through. But we'll pick this up. Let's talk RV parks. So we had this discussion with the steering committee on, when you say RV park, what does that actually mean to you? When we talk RV parks, even between the consultant team and city staff, we're talking about different things. In Cathedral City, there are RV parks, but they're more seasonal lessee spaces where individuals own a RV unit. It is parked there year-round. They come for 6 months of the year, go home for 6 months of the year. It's not what you would consider a true recreational vehicle park. If you've ever gone on camping trips where your family pulls in on a weekend, they're heading up to Joshua Tree, they leave, take their camper out and go back home. So part of the discussion we wanted to have here with Planning Commission tonight was, what is the format that is most appropriate? Right now, the code really doesn't speak to that recreational family going down Interstate 10, traveling the country, pull over for the night, visit Cathedral City, get back on the road and continue on. It really focuses on your seasonal individuals who live here as like second ownership instead of owning a stick-built or a condominium. So we want to have that discussion. Should that be allowed, that shorter term, I'm not talking short-term rentals, shorter term stay, recreational vehicle parks, should that be allowed as a standalone use? Is that appropriate here? Should that be allowed as a portion of a more seasonal park, like the ones you currently have? Should a portion, 20, 30%, be allowed as that recreational piece, or should that even be allowed? So these are things that we wanted to talk about with the Planning Commission, and then thinking beyond that, recreational versus seasonal use, are there amenities that should be required as a base minimum for these kinds of parks locally?
Okay.
Chair.
So I won't go through all my comments on RVs immediately, but just to say that I spent 5 years as an RVer, so, I'm familiar with the concept for sure. I found this whole section rather confusing. There was a lot of information presented and broken down into different groups. You came up with, or the code came up with, rental, ownership, membership, extended occupancy, recreation vehicle campground. And you managed to find that there were examples of all those in the city, so we've got that breakdown. So I think that this may be a bigger discussion than we want to have here, actually, because I think we need to simplify what we mean by each of those types, we need to combine the requirements for some of them. There are certain requirements that are standard at any place, which would be, a public restroom,
Water.
the showers, and then, depending on the type, the hookups for the RV. So, if it's a campground, you may allow just a water and electric hookup, or you may also include the sewage. You'll find that commonly at KOA and other places. So I found it very difficult then to give you an overall yes or no on this part of the code, because I just think it's very messy right now. Other comments?
Don't you call them a caravan?
No,
We do.
not the ones we've got here. Other comments? If not, I'll go back into my spiel. Okay, so let me see what I actually had in terms of individual comments then. There's a question about recreation vacation models. I don't see why we shouldn't have that in the city. There is one already. What I do think is that we have to be more careful about definition in terms of appropriate stays. For example, if we look at BLM restrictions, BLM deals with extended stay in the state, and what they do is provide seasonal permits. And so an extended stay would be up to typically 7 months. They call them seasons. So we would need to start defining stays for these different types. If it's recreational, how long can you be at that place? Hookups I already talked about. Noise limits would need to be the same as for our STVR ordinance. There should be no outside amplified music, no campfires in the campgrounds. So we would need to look at those types of issues as well. I'll just move to my other set of notes. In C1, we're in 110, 150, and C1, we need to define what is permanent. We use that term, but it doesn't say what permanent is. Is that 11 months, 10 months, 3 months? Short-term rentals need to be prohibited throughout. No rental of mobile homes or owner-manager residence at all. And generally, just the confusion of the different types. So those were my main comments. And we seem to be, anything else on?
Yeah, I just
Yes.
wanted to say that during steering committee, I think there was somewhat of not a divide, but mixed opinions, I guess I would say, about whether or not short-term people who are, I guess has been described, someone in a family, they come in, they pull up on a Friday night, they stay over, and then they leave Sunday morning or something with their family. Are they good for the economy? Are they shopping our local businesses? Are they going to our local restaurants? Is there a benefit to our community for having people be able to stop over here versus maybe another nearby desert city? And is that good for our community? Or do we see it more like a short-term rental kind of situation where they're maybe not all that great? I mean, not that they're bad for the city, but that they don't provide any benefit. And I think there was mixed opinions about that, so I was just curious how the commission felt.
I think there are two sides to that. One is that it's like any business. So if the campground wants to be set up and is going to make money, and by the way, it needs to be managed, there needs to be on-site management. That's another requirement. You can't have, there are some campgrounds where you can simply turn up and do what you want. It needs 24/7 monitoring and security, whatever type of campground. But for someone as a tourist, as I was when I was RVing, you don't just want to eat that pre-made pasta that you brought with you. You want to go out to the nearest restaurant. You need to go to amusements that are in the area, movie theaters or whatever. It's really like you just brought your home with you, but you're still doing all the things you would do when you're at home. So going out and eating and so on. So I think it definitely has a benefit to the city, not necessarily any more than somebody just already living here. But again, it's not it shouldn't be up to us to say, well, you can't do this kind of business, period. You know,
It's very similar to lodging and as if you're in a hotel, except your hotel is on wheels and you take it from place to place. We had this discussion with steering committee. I know Cynthia and I grew up in families and still do traditional RVing, and that's what you do. You go and you explore the community that you're in. Sometimes you want to get out, go see the amusements, eat in restaurants, shop in local stores. Again, you can't force the individual to shop here, but it does open a unique opportunity. There are events in the valley that do attract. There are beautiful national parks right in the backyard, where if the city could attract that, it is a market that's not there yet. There is no right or wrong answer, and that's why we really wanted to hash this out with steering committee and yourselves to see if that is something to even consider.
yeah.
So, I mean, you were your own specific example of when you were traveling in an RV, you would probably be staying for one night or 2 nights maybe in a particular location before you'd move on.
Yeah, I think,
somewhere else.
I mean, for us, we were real travelers, so we might stay 3 or 4 nights.
Okay. So if we had that sort of setup here, do we run into the whole short-term, well, it's not really a rental. I mean, I guess it's your own vehicle, and we're not talking about having a static caravan park or an RV park where someone can rent an RV for a weekend or something like
Well, we
that.
have outdoor RV. I mean, that's a different type. So there are places where RVs are set up permanently or semi-permanently.
To be
they
rented.
They still have, no,
No.
that's the point.
Right.
So we would consider those just as much as short-term rentals. So they're owned and operated by somebody who, and if you go to a council meeting, any council meeting, you'll see a lot of people from Outdoor RV.
Yes.
And they will tell you that they're in town for 6 months or 9 months or whatever. They're long-term owners and users of the RVs.
Right.
But going to the other end of the campground end, that's where you have somebody who comes in, but they bring their own rig. We would want to avoid situations like someone setting up a campground and then renting out those spaces as if they were bed and breakfasts. You know,
Why?
Just the sort of holidays we did growing up.
because there's little control over them, just as with short-term
there's-
vacation rentals.
So I know I don't want to open up a big can of worms, but as we often disagree, the short-term rentals, there are ways to, as somebody who used to do them, there are ways to do them properly and there are ways to regulate them properly. And the way we jumped in and prohibited was very reactive. There are places, and I believe we lost a very large income for the city when we just went and did that pretty much outright ban. We are in, and it was a very significant amount of money. We are in a tourist area. We do have a 24/7 population. Finding that balance, there are ways to do that, and there are ways to regulate where short-term rentals aren't such a scary thing. Right now, you say short-term rentals and people panic. There are ways to do that, and I think as a tourist city, we are missing out on a very large income and a potential to bring people here to be exposed to our great city that we're not getting, whereas places like Coachella is or Palm Springs is. And our hotel occupancy, we don't even have that many hotels, and that's one of our biggest taxes. So I think this is a great opportunity to develop business, to actually do it correctly, to maybe start to show how short-term rentals could be done properly with a manager on site, with regulation around the things that people were worried about, such as massive parties, unregulated, or sound, decibel levels, and stuff like that. When you address these up front, and properly, then I think we're missing, we could have a big opportunity, which we need as an income base for the city.
Could I add just a distinguishing factor here, and I don't want to get too far down this hole, but I think calling an RV a short-term rental is a misnomer. And I say that because the biggest issue, the two biggest issues, if I may, with short-term rentals as we understand them, when you take a typical residence and you turn it into a rental home, is you're losing out on housing stock, so you're losing out that affordability piece, and you're changing the character of a residential neighborhood. We're talking about RVs and RV parks, not at all the same thing. These are this is a lodging, always been a lodging facility. It's going to operate as a lodging facility. It's changing the seasonal lodging facility to a weekend lodging facility or a daily lodging facility. So
the STVR ordinance is determined by the underlying zoning. And that's already settled, so I don't think we need to get into that. To change it now, because it was passed by a majority of voters, it would have to go back to another election in 28 or 30 or whenever. So I don't want to get into that discussion. It just needs to meet if it's at a static location like the owner-member locations, it just has to meet the same standard, the STVR standard. Yes.
Getting back to just like the development standards of physically how the RV park is set up, I put in some specific comments, which I don't need to repeat. But I think there's a good example, and I hate to say this, of what we don't want. And it's probably a park that's 50 or 60 years old. It was done in the county. It's about 2 blocks up from Perez on the west side of Cathedral Canyon. And I would suggest that you both, try to see that, because at the time it was probably great, but it's unpaved. And we want to make sure that these places that come in now have all the amenities, that they're paved streets, they don't generate dust and those kinds of things. So I would suggest that would be a good place to start on developing a list of standards that we want, because you could see it there as to what we don't want.
Yeah, we do have the bones of that in the draft. It's just a little bit messy the way it's all laid
It is.
out.
It's confusing between RVs and mobile homes.
Right.
And I said that in my comments. It's very confusing.
Yeah. Okay.
And what I'm hearing from the Planning Commission, and if staff concurs, I'm hearing that there needs to be some cleanup of the descriptions of the different types, clarification, additional development standards, consistency with the short-term rental, which would fold this in just based on what we're hearing. And I think we can work with city staff to do a cleanup and rewrite for your consideration.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay, next slide. Here it is.
Yep.
For our last discussion question, we are back to used vehicle sales and rentals, and also vehicle repair shops. The reason that we are bringing this up as a specific topic to discuss is we're wondering if there are any unique or specific standards that should be applied to these uses, whether those are site-specific standards such as increased setbacks or operational standards like limiting hours of operation. And additionally, how can this code regulate or prevent the overproliferation of these types of uses? So as proposed in the draft code, these uses are only allowed with a minor or conditional use permit in commercial and industrial zones. There is an opportunity to potentially limit these types of uses to industrial or employment zones only. Or there's also an opportunity to simply apply additional standards to regulate these types of uses. So we could apply objective spacing or buffering tools. When we discussed this topic with the steering committee, there was a mixture of opinions that we heard. Some committee members thought that although there is an oversaturation of these types of uses in this city, these types of uses are not as readily seen in other surrounding cities. And so, as what some of the committee members expressed, other residents from other cities come to Cathedral City to pay business owners at these types of businesses. However, other committee members indicated that this type of use isn't necessarily a problem in and of itself, but that there's more of a visual overproliferation along certain roadways, and so perhaps a better way to regulate these types of uses is to regulate the design or the visual character of these types of businesses. So if we could hand it back to the chair to facilitate a discussion on this question.
Thank you. So let me open this up to other commissioners, I believe. Commissioner McPhail has
So,
something to
yes, so
say.
as written right now, you've got these uses are allowed in MEPCU, well, with MEPCP in commercial and industrial zones. So that would include the PCC, the planned commercial, which we've just had a sizable discussion on. And I think later on you mentioned limiting to industrial employment zones only. I think given a lot of the discussion we just had this evening and in previous meetings with specific applicants who came in, as I mentioned earlier this evening, we had one a few weeks ago on Date Palm that we had some reservations about because it was right next to a residential area. And we also just had, I think some of us had a general concern about that particular corridor and what our vision might be for it. I'm kind of partial to the idea of some of these more intensive ones, like that make noise or paint and auto repair, that might not be a great location for it. Certainly not on Date Palm and maybe other locations too. I would be interested in putting that to an industrial type area.
Vice Chair.
Oh, no, you,
Oh, yeah,
I didn't know you were waiting for me, sorry.
okay. Okay, well, let me add to those comments. I have a problem if we're going to limit one type of business and not another. For example, we don't seem to have any appetite for limiting the number of gas stations.
We do, it is in the code. There is a limitation in this code.
Well, which
the-
limit are you talking about?
There's a certain number per intersection that I think is in.
Yes, there is, but we have lots of intersections. So I can see that we might achieve what we want to do here by zoning.
Yeah.
I don't think that we can limit specific businesses to a certain number of businesses. Yeah. There are a number of businesses. I mean, the question here mentions body repair, outdoor sales, major repair. I'd add to that list all the other ancillary practices: auto repair, tinting, wraps, respraying. There's a whole bunch of auto-related industries. And I think it would be good if we could slowly but surely filter them down into a different area. And that would address the complaints that we had a few weeks ago about that particular area on Date Palm, that it seems to have this rundown look and feel to it. But I note that in the discussion that you had with the steering committee, some people mentioned that maybe we can overcome some of these issues with architectural quality and design. So I'm wondering what that discussion was exactly and what people suggested.
Yeah, I think there were some comments that, right now we restrict all these uses to Ramon Road, and Ramon Road is also the main thoroughfare one of the main thoroughfares that people will take from other cities to come through our city. And while there are lots of different types of businesses on Ramon Road, is that, a lot of those businesses maybe aren't presenting a really appealing, engaging public face for the city. Because they are so concentrated there. Again, we're not criticizing the businesses themselves, just it is a somewhat industrial kind of look to the city. So I think the thought was, I think Planner Schultz brought up that in Palm Desert, a lot of times these uses are behind other uses, so that what's on the main drag isn't necessarily automotive, and it maybe there's something different that you see on the street front. But it was just a discussion that we had about, I don't think anyone was suggesting that we limit the number of them, but just what can be, is having them all concentrated in one area a good idea, or is it better to have them spread out so that they don't, they aren't all in one? I mean, I think there's a lot of discussion that could be had, and that was.
So the downside of having one concentration is that everyone has to go there for those services. And that inevitably means that you're going to set up sort of an area that on an arterial somewhere that is going to have all these stores all the way along. So I'm not sure that's the right answer either. We might say, well, we do right now, certain arterials are free of those businesses, and we may look at our arterials in particular, which are an obvious place to put these businesses. If you're the business, being on an arterial means that everyone's going to see you and everyone's going to know how to get to you. Maybe the suggestion of having them sort of more removed from those main routes is perhaps the way to look at it. I don't have a good solution for that, but those are the general thoughts. Any other comments on those areas?
Well, this came up a few times over the last several months. And I'm thinking just recently with the dealer or the repair shop that was across from the amphitheater, and being able to have some sort of visual transition was a big point that we tried to make from the amphitheater to the business across the street by trying to get this issue of more trees or more landscaping or more, improved appearances. I know on Whispering Palms and Ramon, there's a gas station, a convenience store, and a auto repair shop, and I think a car wash that's right in that sort of concentrated corner. And if they had any zoning requirement to make it more attractive, that place in the neighborhood it looks so blighted, and it always has been, and since the decades that I've been coming to the city. If there was some sort of requirement that they had to present themselves better, which I really love that Commissioner Malikoff was able to get the tree thing as part of that requirement. If there's a way to do that, it makes the well-being of the employees go up. It gives them shade. It gives them green space. It gives a place for the people in the neighborhood to at least have a visual appeal. I'm less on restricting the businesses, but how we are doing them and how they're being implemented. Mm-hmm. And I agree with Commissioner Mead in regards to time. I think these types of businesses that do cause interruptions to residential areas, and quite frankly, every place in Cathedral City every commercial space is next to a residential. So you can't have 500 to 1,000 feet. It's impossible because the house is already built where the commercial is next to it. So to have some sort of architectural, vegetatal, sort of decorative experience, I think that benefits everybody.
And I think what you're discussing is exactly where the steering committee was starting to head towards the end of the conversation, and Vice Chair Mead touched on that, was it's not so much the use, it's the appearance. And I believe one committee member did use the word blighted corridor, where the uses are vibrant, they're popular, they're used. People come to the city for that use, but its appearance is what's lacking. And one way to get around that is through site orientation, landscaping standards, architectural standards, screening standards, so that it just creates a more welcoming environment when you're visiting the city or visiting the use.
With the understanding, though, that just like, you know, the Highway 111 reimaginations and all the other cities that they're doing, that's 30, 40 years out that you're going to achieve the goal. So if we change the standards for Ramon Road, it's not something we're going to see in the next 5 to 10 years. But as new businesses come in, and it's a tire place or whatever, you know, then they'll have the right setbacks, they'll have more landscaping, they'll have more shade. So I just have to, I think people just need to know that this is really long-term.
And I think it's understanding that code changes like this, or even your general plan, is not an overnight thing. That's why you look 20, 30, 40 years out. Existing businesses will continue to run until there is a trigger point where a new one comes in, or some sort like that. So yes, I agree. There's some reality that it's not going to change overnight, and Ramon Road's going to be bolstered by landscaping at all of these businesses.
It's also competition and a consciousness building, because if you have the consciousness of a car repair shop in Beverly Hills, that's a very different consciousness. You go to those car repair shops and they're beautiful. They're nice places to literally hang out. And you go to the one on Ramon and there's broken chairs, and you know, it's the environmental consciousness that's built around the business.
Okay, any other comments? So that's the end of your official questions.
That is the end of the official questions, but Chair, I hear you have additional topics
I
that
do.
you would like to go through.
Most are very quick, and I will get through them in a minute, but two commissioners have mentioned
Yes.
the sprinkler issue.
Oh,
So
right.
if I can go back to Commissioner McPhail, who raised it initially.
Let's see if I can find that. I was in 130, but it was actually 030. Yeah, this was something that, as I scanned it, it did occur to me, and a member of the public did bring it up as a comment, and I think it's just an FYI for us. And it was in relation to sprinklers not being required in ADUs and JADUs per building code. And I was just wondering, for our edification and the person who gave us that question, is it a state mandate, or it's in the state rules about ADUs and JADUs that they don't need to have or have sprinklers? And if that's the case, does the city have the latitude to say, well, you know what, we would actually like to have sprinklers? Is that something that we have any control over?
And I'm going to defer to city staff to respond.
We have no latitude. If the primary home does not have sprinklers, then we cannot require sprinklers of the ADU or JADU.
Okay. Is it common for homes? Well, yeah, my home doesn't have sprinklers in it, so yes.
Well, you know, homes that were built several years ago may not have fire sprinklers because that code came into effect. Well, it came into effect several years ago, but if anything was built in the 50s or 60s, they're not going to have sprinklers because it wasn't required at that time.
Right.
And wasn't that reversed now?
Yeah, now you have to have sprinklers for all new construction, residential construction.
And although I'm all for sprinklers, like if I wanted to do an ADU, I understand just a small couple hundred square foot ADU is another 10,000 to have sprinklers. That's a big jump to your price tag just for one item.
Yeah.
Like, I think it'd be great, safety-wise and all that type of stuff. And how much do we impose that upon?
Is there a requirement to have smoke detectors and things like that in them? So
Yeah,
that's what
smoke
I have.
and CO2.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair
All
enough.
right. Okay, deep breath.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Just two things real quick.
Yeah.
I don't know if I mentioned, I gave you all my other items that weren't on your list, but I think two things that I left off real quick. A kennel should have 24-hour supervision because there was a case in Pasadena where there was a fire and like 40 dogs died. I'd hate to see that happen at one of our doggy daycare places. And then a new issue that's come up with crime prevention is that you need to have different kinds of lighting at the ATMs at a bank now, because that's the newest thing is people hang out at the ATM and then they rob you. So we want to make sure that those are well lit.
All right. If I go to ADU and JADU, 11030, one comment and one question. C3 says that the ADU has to be constructed of one or more of the materials used on the primary dwelling, but I think that's out of date, isn't it?
So this draft does not reflect the most current version that's just gone to city council. So you're recalling correctly.
Okay. Well then, in C4, I had a question about if you have a single story main dwelling, can you add an ADU that's 2-story?
I believe you can. We've been having that discussion as well internally, but I believe you may be able to.
Yeah, because this
So we'll
says that
clarify
you can go to the height for the zone. Well, the height for the zone might be 26 feet.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And I think Commissioner.
Thank you.
Yes. Mentioned this. Oh, this is different. So 11040 is about antennas, and I think we just need to check that with FCC regulations because you do mention that an exception is made, or planning can make an exception if it restricts the signal strength, but it just seems unnecessary to put in, you've got to put it around the back of the house when, half our houses point towards Edam Hill, which is the only TV transmitter in the area. So lots and lots of houses are going to have that issue. So I don't know why we bother putting in that restriction that it's got to be around the back. 11050, bed and breakfast. That looks fine, but I wonder if we should be mentioning or referencing the difference between a bed and breakfast inn and a home share, which is under the short-term rental restrictions. Community composting, 11080. I couldn't understand why we're banning reverse vending. So could somebody explain? Silence is taken as consent.
After 9 o'clock, I start to shut down. I actually would have to go back and look into why we did that. I don't want to miss. There typically are hour limitations on those.
I used to use them all the time, but they disappeared. And I don't know why they disappeared. They were typically outside supermarkets. The CRV state law requires supermarkets to have some way of doing it within 1 mile of a supermarket.
And I do see that Planner Schultz unmuted. So I don't know if you have anything to add that might help the conversation between.
I would just say we want to make it as general as possible for people to be able to recycle and get their CRV back.
I submitted that same comment on my list before the
you
steering
did?
committee. It was literally that exact same question. Why are we restricting that?
All right.
Well, and all I can say to that is I asked that very same question, and now the light went on, and I'm like, oh, now I remember what I found in my research on this. It really had to do with sort of like loitering and littering and after hours hanging out on the property and that sort of thing. If it's inside of a supermarket like Coinstar or something like that, that's one thing. But when they're standalone reverse, where you stick the cans in, it can encourage undesirable behavior. I'll leave it at that. But it's a issue. Do we want to allow something like that?
I would say if our police department agrees and says it's a problem, then we shouldn't allow it. But I don't know that we should just assume that there's going to be a conduct issue.
I think that what I'm thinking is that perhaps it's also just a maintenance issue because it's unmanned. And so it's a matter of if they're not properly maintaining it, it's potentially an ongoing code enforcement issue. I'm not sure if there's been issues with persons bringing items to reverse vend and then they find that actual type of recyclables not accepted, and so they leave it there. So there might be those type of issues that come into play, but we're happy to research it some more.
Yeah, I mean, just look into it and see if we can do that, because the more convenient we make it, the more recycling we do.
And those are regulation issues. They're not banning issues in my mind. I mean, I hear what you're saying. It's a nuisance, but that's more about regulating how the business is properly run than not having the business.
Well, and also, wasn't that under the section about what could be as part of a composting business? So, I mean, it seems to me if a composting business or site is fenced and that is inside, you reduce all those issues that and they're responsible for it, as opposed to something that's just out in the middle of nowhere.
Okay.
Well, I think we can revisit that with staff. We have it noted.
Okay. 11090s, community gardens. Oh dear, we stumbled into animals again. And I've looked around, and various cities have community garden.
None of them have animals.
And they don't allow animals.
Yeah.
And part of that is because community gardens are not attended overnight. Security issues, abuse issues. I wouldn't have even chickens, never mind roosters. So I would look at that again. That's E1B in that section.
I brought that up at the.
Well, I don't know, because I don't go to the meetings.
I know. I'm just saying that I said that too. I agree with you.
But anyway,
The bees wouldn't need to be regulated, would they?
You all want to stay all night. E5, hours for construction equipment. I didn't know why we're not just tying that to the regular construction rules for residential areas. That, why we came up with different hours. So why don't we just tie it back to our normal ordinance? 110-100, drive-in and drive-through. Just a note, and I wasn't sure, but I think we do this anyway, is that I don't think we should have drive-throughs directly accessible from arterials. So I believe for Starbucks, for example, on 111, they had to have a separate slip road there installed, a lane installed. But I think in general, they shouldn't be accessed directly from arterials. Through parking lots for a mall or whatever, yes.
You mean like just so I understand what you mean, so like the McDonald's and the Hot Chicken both have drive-throughs on Date Palm, but you have to go into the parking lot to get into them.
Yeah, and Dutch Brothers. Same thing. You have to go into the parking lot and then get to
Do we have any that are just on a lot by themselves? I don't think we do. I think most of them are accessible from within the shopping center.
I'm just saying that should be part of
No,
our
I
restrictions.
think you're right.
Chair, with due respect, is it possible, however many you have left, to email those? Or do we need to go through them individually with the group?
We can go through them here. It's not that much more.
I know you're always talking about efficiency and how you would like us to talk less.
Well, I have one
and-
thing that I would like to bring up for discussion.
go
So
ahead.
unless you have, I know some of yours are probably for discussion, so I just wanted to mention that
Yeah.
before we potentially wrap.
Right. The 110-120 emergency shelters. I was just concerned that the plan doesn't mention the clientele for the emergency shelter, and I think we have to consider groups at risk, under 18, families, and so on, women. We don't pull that out as a requirement. Recreational vehicles. We've done all those. Why don't you go while I'm finding my next point?
Okay, it is actually on the list of things that came up at the very end, which is, there's a section in the code for timeshares. I did a little research, and several of the communities around us either ban them entirely or heavily restrict them because they view them not just timeshares, but also those fractional ownership homes like Picasso and things like that, because they can reduce housing stock. They have a lot of the same problems that short-term rentals have. I personally have had negative experiences getting sucked into timeshare presentations. You can't turn on the TV without seeing a commercial about someone who's trying to get out of a timeshare. I don't think we have enough seasonal housing here. I don't know that there's a necessity, and my concern is that since some of the communities around ours ban them, that we could end up being the city that has all the timeshares, which I think could potentially be negative. So my personal feeling is that we should prohibit them outright, but I wanted to see what the rest of the commission felt about it.
I wouldn't mind, but we already have some, of course. CCBC recently changed to a timeshare model. So there are some existing.
You have one behind Target, too.
I was going to add to that, actually, that regardless of restriction on timeshares, we need to look at how we legally restrict shared ownership schemes like Picasso, because that has been a problem for the last 5 years at least, and we've never really come to an agreement on how we can restrict those.
Well, but I guess the other cities view them as basically the same because they're both co-owned, right? So a timeshare is sort of.
No.
Well, I mean, it's not co-owned, but they operate in very similar ways, I guess.
They operate in similar ways. The legal issue, as I understand it, is that a timeshare is defined as a property that is not owned by you, but you're given a right to use it, whereas Picasso properties are actually owned by a limited company, and you own a share of the limited company, and therefore you are an owner of that property. And that was that was the problem that Palm Springs ran into with Picasso.
But why then do people have such a hard time selling their timeshares, or are they just trying to get out of the agreement for it?
They're trying to get out of the agreement, which comes with maintenance costs.
Right.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, but we're making changes to a lot of things in the code that would leave non-conforming uses. So there is no reason why we couldn't restrict timeshares, new timeshares moving forward if we did want to do that.
No, I think we need to look at whether we could do that. Okay. Yeah. 180 is senior and elderly housing. And what I didn't understand here is, I understand that 55 plus and 62 plus originated from HOPA. So that's the original basis for that, but it's a marketing issue. It's not actually a legal issue. So why are we dealing with 55 plus and 62 plus in our code when any property that wants to can set up as a 55 plus community? We shouldn't need to have a separate section all about that and have 3/4 of a parking space if you're elderly and one space if you're 5 years younger. I mean, none of that bit of code did not make sense to me.
Are you sure? I read that section completely differently. I was thinking about it as my grandmother moved to a senior housing facility that it's like, I think it's called Brookdale or something like that. They have communities all over the country. She bought a single family home in this community.
Yes.
And then the idea was that as she got older and maybe she was in independent living, and then she could move into the kind of high rise, which provided assisted living, and then they have memory care, but it's all in one big thing. So that's what I was thinking of when we were talking about senior facilities and senior living.
But we have
That's
code,
where I think
we have code sorting out how much parking if you're 55 years old or if you're 62 years old or whatever. And these don't respond to the industry gerontology groupings by age at all.
Right, but I'm saying I think that's totally different than just a 55 and over HOA community.
But anybody could set up a 55 plus HOA community with the rules that they want to have.
Right, I think I was viewing
yeah.
it separately from
Anyway,
what you were talking about.
So,
I think we can revisit it again with staff and clarify, and we'll look at the legal ramifications too when we start to identify specific types of development.
okay, the big one. 9110-190, and thank you to Christina for providing this piece of information. sexually orientated businesses, this has annoyed me for the last 10 years. It lists massage parlors as a sexually oriented business in the current code 982.030. They are not. The California legislature has just reclassified massage therapy actually as a healthcare profession. They're licensed, or we are licensed. I am a CMT. We are licensed by the state, and it's extremely, extremely upsetting to massage therapists to be listed in the sexually oriented business area. So as that code gets passed or amended, that needs to go. Okay. Okay, and the only other thing that I had, two other things, okay. Vehicle fueling stations, any references to vehicle fueling stations, and I didn't understand why 230 and 240 were labeled the way they are. They should be combined, I guess. But when we're talking about fuel, please consider EV as well. So when you're talking about this gas station can do this, or they can sell gas or diesel, well, they could also, and they will be selling electric charging too, the new one here. And in particular, under exceptions, I would say if both stations are providing the same mix of fuels, but one of them is providing electric charging, then they are not the same or equivalent type of station. So we know that most gas stations have gas and diesel, but for example, the new tribal fueling station will add EV. So it shouldn't be considered as an exact equivalent. Yeah.
So just to clarify, vehicle fueling station, what I'm hearing from the chair and would just want confirmation from commission is that vehicle fueling station should allow for the spectrum of fueling, whether all different fuel when you think of typical fuel types to EV. So you technically, in that realm, could have a standalone just vehicle charging style gas station with the canopy and you pull up and do that. I just want to just clarify.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm completely blanking on the name of it, but there's another type of fuel that it only exists pretty much in California in terms of the stations. I think Nissan had a car that's very short. Do you know what I'm talking about? We had them, hydrogen.
The hydrogen, then you have the E85, and there's diesel, and there's your typical gasoline and electric, and what's going to come up in the next 15 years, who knows? But yes.
But yeah, I mean, if we're saying like we may not want 4 traditional gas stations that only sell gasoline and diesel on 4 corners of an intersection, but if one's an electric charging station, one's gas and diesel, one's hydrogen, and that's a different mix, I think is the point that you're getting at, right? Is that they're not the same.
Yeah, but we're not precluding that an intersection has to have different fueling types on each corner.
I understand that, but I'm saying if we're putting any sort of limitations, what he's saying is recognize the differences between different fueling options.
Yeah, I mean,
instead of classifying them all the same.
If code says gas and diesel, we need to also allow for the fact that it may be offering electric charging.
Understood.
And that's it for me. Anybody else? No?
I have a question because, I mean, I know Commissioner Malikoff and I both submitted pretty extensive notes before the steering committee meeting. There's no point in going through them all now. We would be here forever. So I guess my question is I know you keep a log of all that stuff. I can't remember, do you send that out to the Planning Commission or are you only sending it back out to steering committee? Because I think it would be helpful if all of our other comments were distributed at least at some point after we've had this conversation.
Yes, and that was actually, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because that was actually my intent, is to redistribute that.
Okay,
as I
great.
have those done. I'm behind on that. But yes, I do collect all of the comments. I encourage you to always, so a lot of these things are kind of self-explanatory. Those are the things that I put in the log sheet. We'll address them as we go on, misnumbering, things like that. simple, easy to address. Anything that needs further discussion, that's what I encourage you to talk about in this room.
Okay. Anything else? No. So, did you have some additional comments? No. Okay. Any public comments on this item?
Chair Lee, we currently have no attendees, but we did receive one comment for the record. It was provided to the members of the commission and made available at the entrance. Erie Knox provided comments and considerations related to section 9.110.30 and the section related to single-room occupancy.
Thank you. Moving on to item 5 on the agenda, Commissioners' comments. Yes.
Very quickly, I recently ran into someone who, similar to an experience Commissioner Malakoff has had, told me that they see me on TV. And I just wanted to say to anybody who actually watches these meetings, thank you for watching these meetings, because it is, I mean, honestly, they were like, oh yeah, we learned so much stuff. And I think that that's really great that we have people who are watching. We don't know who's watching, but I appreciate, I'm sure we all appreciate that there are people who are participating in the process, who are learning, who are, talking to people about what we talk about. So that was it. Just wanted to say thank you.
Any other comments?
I get a lot of kids that that tell me they see me on TV. But I just wanted to compliment the commission on the discussion for the similar use determination. I think it was a really substantive discussion, and everybody did a really good job in really getting into the weeds on this and coming to a good decision, because I don't think it wound up the way that I thought it was when I walked in here. And it's because we had such a good discussion. So kudos to everybody.
Thank you. And as usual, just another kudos for the exceptionally detailed minutes. I actually felt like I was at that meeting. And I'd forgotten some of the things I said, which is sometimes disturbing.
Very detailed.
Item 6, City Attorney comments.
No comments, thank you.
Item 7, staff comments.
No staff comments.
Thank you, in which case this meeting is now adjourned.